Thank you very much. I will now proceed by indicating honorable delegates that before we proceed, I would like to remind you that the virtual sitting constitutes a sitting of the National Council of Provinces, and the place of the sitting is deemed to be Cape Town, where the seat of the National Council of Provinces is. In addition to the rules of virtual sittings, the rules of the National Council of Provinces, including the rules of debate, apply. Delegates should note that anything sent to everyone via the chat screen is deemed to have been sent to the House and may be ruled upon. So I'm urging members to avoid saying anything untoward. Delegates enjoy the same powers and privileges that apply in a sitting of National Council of Provinces, and that refers to the question of powers and privileges. For the purposes of the quorum, all delegates who logged in shall be considered to be present. So urging members there to please log in. For the duration of the sitting, delegates must mute their microphones unless if they wish to speak. Any delegate who wishes to speak should use the raise your hand function. I'm sure honorable members by now are familiar with this raise your hand function. Honorable delegates, please note that the interpretation facility is active, and delegates are reminded to please keep their videos on for the duration of the sitting. So please indicate when you want to speak. Having said that, honorable delegates, we will now proceed to the subject for discussion. That's the debate in terms of Rule 84.1, sponsored by Honorable Member S.J. Mohai, on government's response to the coronavirus pandemic. On government's response to the coronavirus pandemic. So, without further ado and without any waste of time, I now call on Honorable S.J. Mohai to open the debate.
Thank you, Chairperson, honorable members and distinguished special delegates, honorable ministers, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, Minister Patel, and the Deputy Minister, Dr. Patla. Ladies and gentlemen, this debate on government integrated response to the outbreak of the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic takes place on the two occasions of two critical historical moments in our country that have not only increased the tempo of our struggle against the system of apartheid-white minority domination, but also shaped the vision of a national democratic society we seek to construct. These are the 65th anniversary of the historic People's Congress, which adopted the Freedom Charter on the 26th June 1955 in Kliptown, and the 44th anniversary of the National Youth Uprising, which started on the 16th June 1976 in the township of Soweto. The COVID-19 pandemic has laid bare the deepening inequalities in our society and exposed the failure of Washington consensus and its new liberal paradigm that advocates for minimalist state in favor of the unfettered role of the markets in the economy. It has brought about a renewed reawakening about the centrality of the state in the economy in favor of the poor, the working class, and the vulnerable. It is for this reason that we in the African National Congress entered this debate with renewed inspiration and sense of urgency for the realization of the vision of the Freedom Charter, which proclaims, among others, that there is no government that can justly claim authority unless it is based on the will of the people, and all shall share in the country's wealth. This vision has been translated into a coherent and integrated government plan, articulated in the Vision 2030, the National Development Plan. In its very overview, the NDP makes a bold and courageous statement, which quoted directly from the Reconstruction and Development Program, does, and I quote, "No political democracy can survive and flourish if the mass of our people remain in poverty, without land, without tangible prospects of a better life. Attacking poverty and deprivation must therefore be the first priority of a democratic government." Honorable Chairperson, as we assess the country's integrated response to the COVID-19 pandemic, we do so not in a vacuum, but guided by a broad vision of the Freedom Charter and the NDP. We do this because much as COVID-19 pandemic is first and foremost a health challenge, it has far-reaching human, social, and economic impacts on our people. The outbreak of the pandemic has unfolded within the context of the persistence of multiple socio-economic challenges facing our country. These are but not limited to the spatial concentration of vast majority of our people in densely populated and underserviced settlements, with poor access to basic services like public health and education, decent housing, electricity, and water and sanitation. At a political level, South Africa, like any other developing country, has relatively weak grassroots community-based and civil society organizations to educate and mobilize our communities as architects of their own future. These challenges are compounded by persistent challenges of unemployment and poverty. Honorable Chairperson, these socio-economic challenges have and continue to make the vast majority of our people more vulnerable to the pandemic. The response and intervention of our government under the leadership of His Excellency, President Cyril Ramaphosa, has demonstrated an integrated approach that recognizes these realities. At the core of government mitigation of this pandemic through the National Disaster Management and lockdown has been two interrelated objectives. One, an attempt to balance the management of the spread of the virus with the mitigation of its disastrous human, social, and economic impacts on our people. This is clearly demonstrated in various sector-specific socio-economic relief measures rolled out by government. There is no doubt that these measures are celebrated by the World Health Organization as among the best in developing economies in many senses compared to most of the developed economies as well. We salute the government for extending and rolling out socio-economic relief measures to the significant majority of our people, in particular the unemployed, women and children who are the most vulnerable. Chairperson, there is no moment of complacency as the future is still unknown. This is made more compelling by medical scientists who are cautioning about the worst we should brace ourselves for in the coming period ahead. How we brace ourselves for the future with a sense of resilience must be based on lessons of the past and an honest evaluation of the present. In this regard, allow me to share with you the story of the small rural town of the of Bethule in the Southern Free State, which is my constituency. This town is like many others, with as mass unemployment, poverty, and underdevelopment. Sorry, Chair. I was saying that this town, like many others, has, okay, I'll go back to my text now again. This town, like many others, has mass unemployment and underdevelopment. Here, the people are having a challenge to be tested, or at times even refusing to be tested, citing, among others, lack of medical facilities at the local clinic, and also making it difficult for the nurses to operate in the community, as the issue is much more stigmatized and there is a challenge around the community. So this is an area that we ourselves as elected political office bearers have to do much more work in it. This speaks volume to two interrelated fundamental issues about COVID-19 and the lockdown, namely the poor public education and outreach by government, which has opened the space for opportunist elements who politicize the pandemic to mislead our people for narrow political gains. Chairpersons and honorable members, the communication drive and public awareness should include customized and easy to use information communication technology platforms where people can ask for help from higher authorities or report unbecoming conduct by public officials and members of the public. This seems to be a challenge at this moment. Related to this issue is poor participation of the people in the decision making. Whilst we note the constraints imposed by lockdown and agency associated with taking timely decisions on the COVID-19, there is a need for innovative ways by government to test the impact of its policy choices with our people directly. According to the media reports, the Northern Cape Provincial government has created a platform where people can express their views, experiences, and proposal to government on the implementation of national disaster management and the national lockdown. These views and experiences of our people enrich the Provincial Command Council review of its policy choices in a meaningful way. Chairperson, there isn't enough of a sense of existence of integrated national strategy to partner with different sectors of civil society, community-based organization and knowledge communities, like maybe mobilizing even those who have served in the public service before, like health professionals, on a targeted aspects for the rolling out of government response to COVID-19. This is critically so in the rural areas and informal settlement. Honorable members, as leadership and political parties, we have a huge role to play in mobilizing our constituencies around common vision against COVID-19. It is our members and supporters who are affected by this pandemic, and we cannot stand idle or get fixated into our party political postures where history demands us to unite our communities against common invisible enemy, COVID-19. To borrow from Martin Luther King Jr., history will judge us not for what we did, but what we did not do during this time, namely standing united against COVID-19. The ministers present here today will certainly agree that national disaster and lockdown against COVID-19 were both moments of pain and despair on the one hand, and on the other hand, learning and opening of new opportunities for the state to do things differently and more efficiently. Whilst the end of the national disaster and lockdown will bring great relief to all of us, the reconstruction and development challenges ahead are immense and complex and require coordinated state capacity and response. The economy has suffered significant decline accompanied by deepening levels of unemployment, poverty, and inequality. The strategic task of repositioning the state to this challenge cannot be postponed into the distant future, but must begin now. Accordingly, this would include thoroughgoing macro reconfiguration and reorientation of the state and policy changes and renewal that will require wider national consensus. It is my submission that it will be important in a debate like this if the executive could take the country into confidence about some of the work being done as a building block for this eventuality. This is not about cheap political posturing, but single most defining act of visionary leadership. We simply have to restructure our broken economy, as many countries the world over are doing. We need a social compact between the government, business, labor, and civil society, and broader civil society to do this. We need an active role of both the state and the market, which ensure the state plays a more active role in ensuring growth, development, and job creation, while allowing private sector to get reasonable rates of their investment. Honorable Chairperson, this debate provides us with an opportunity to reflect critically and account honestly to our people about the claim that has permeated the public discourse about the role of Parliament during the COVID-19 pandemic and national disaster. According to this claim, Parliament went into self-quarantine during the national lockdown and abandoned its constitutional obligation to oversee the executive during the critical moment. To respond to this claim requires putting the issues in context as a point of departure. The national lockdown requires each arm or organ of state to make a redetermination of how it's going to operate during lockdown in line with the regulations. In response to this, the presiding officers of Parliament redirected the relevant select and portfolio committees whose work has bearing on state of national disaster to continue with oversight of the implementation of the lockdown resolutions. Subsequent to this, all identified parliamentary committees in both houses were fully in action, overseeing and monitoring the executive. The second redetermination by presiding officers led to the review of rules of both houses in line with the unforeseen circumstances of the lockdown to enable Parliament to sit as normally as possible through virtual platforms like we're doing today as well. These were done and Parliament has been in full action. What should perhaps be considered is that Parliament was not accessible to as many of our people as it could be on the television screens. Instead, the vast majority of our people were excluded as they do not have access to pay TV channels like DSTV, which are accessible only to the few. Chairperson, this is one of the critical national challenges that the COVID-19 pandemic has laid bare. The unequal access to communication and media platforms, and we need to address this urgently. To conclude, allow me to extend our heartfelt condolences to the families, friends, and colleagues of those who have succumbed to the COVID-19. Last night, I learned that it is almost close to 2,000, the number of those who have succumbed to COVID-19. May their souls rest in peace. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you very much, Chief Whip. And that takes us to our second speaker, Honorable Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. Please proceed, Madam.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, delegates from provinces, compatriots, ladies and gentlemen, and colleagues, ministers and deputy ministers. It is now 109 days since the first case was reported on our shores. Although the virus was discovered in Wuhan in China in December 2019, it has spread like wildfire across all the corners of the globe and is causing havoc. At our last count, there were 9 million infections in the world and over 471,000 deaths and over 4.8 million recoveries worldwide. Its impact globally has caused untold misery, with global economies expected to plummet by at least 3%, global trade shrinking. Everywhere in the world, job losses are expected, and on our own African continent, the economy is expected to shrink by about 5%. Even in the most advanced economies in the world, they have been found wanting when it comes to the response. In general, they've mounted a mixed stimulus package in an attempt to mitigate the effects of the virus and jumpstart their declining economies. Nothing could have prepared us to deal with this virus, not since the Spanish flu, which was more than 100 years ago. And this pandemic is not only a health crisis, but it's also an economic crisis. We have not seen the depression of the economy as like this since the Great Depression of the 20s. On our continent, we've registered 306,567 cases as of yesterday, with 8,115 fatalities, with 212 recoveries. The alarming pace of infection we have seen on our continent is a cause for concern. For instance, it took us 100 days to move to 100,000 cases since the first infection was recorded in Egypt. But it only took us 18 days to move from 100 to 200,000. And it has taken us only 10 days to move from 200 to 300,000. So we can see that on our continent, the infections are still accelerating, whereas in the greater part of the world, other than the Americas, it's mainly declining. Certainly, this has been the case when it comes to our country as well. When we last addressed this House, we had 22,582 cases with 429 deaths. Today, we have 101,590,000 confirmed cases with 1,991 fatalities and 53,130 recoveries. But of course, this situation could have been worse if the president and the cabinet and government as a whole did not take measures at a very early stage and constituted the national, the provincial, and the district command councils, which we briefed the House about last time we addressed this House. Before the president announced the lockdown, our infections were doubling at about 2 to 3 days. And it was clear that if we don't do anything, we will have an exponential curve that will overwhelm our health service, that will overburden our healthcare workers, and we would not have coped as a country. And therefore, the lockdown was put in place in order to slow down the infection, to flatten the curve, because we know that the virus does not move from one person to the other. It is moved by people. So if we employ measures of social distancing so that people don't move the virus to the next person, wash our hands, put on masks, then the virus will slow down in terms of moving from person to person. So this gave us very much needed time and opportunity to improve our health services, to get more health workers on board, to ensure that when our people need the health services, they'll be able to get those health services. And Siyabonga Mzansi that you heeded the president and the government's call. Most people did heed the lockdown. It was a collective sacrifice that we needed. And we thank the health workers and everyone for it. Indeed, the extraordinary measures that were implemented paid off. The health system is better. We've all seen how many more beds have been added to the hospitals, how many more ICU beds and ventilators. So that has improved the situation, but we cannot say we are now at optimum. And that's the reason that we have not gone back to normal, because we are not yet 100% ready. And as the Chief Whip said just a few minutes ago, this virus has placed right into our faces the glaring realities of hunger, poverty, inequality, unemployment faced by our people. It has also exposed the intolerable conditions under which our people still live, especially when it comes to water and sanitation, and of course, the crowded nature of some of our settlements. And this is something that we have to deal with. I'll say a few words, but I'm sure my colleague will say even a lot more. And we've also seen the gender-based violence and femicide rearing its head again. The virus has also exposed our own manufacturing, import-export patterns because it's clear that we are not even some of the basic things we need. Of course, and now we've started, but just the shortage in relation to medical and healthcare supplies, such as PPEs, is a good example. That we have over-relied on imports, even on things that we can manufacture here. And I think now there's a consensus that COVID-19 should be a reset button, which will chart a better and more inclusive growth path, which will create vibrant, resilient, and climate-smart communities. And it is for that reason that working in the districts is going to be critical, and we must build our economies through, in part, infrastructure, and that infrastructure must also include a provision of basic needs: water, electricity, sanitation, health and education, social infrastructure, human settlements, and roads. And it must mean also decentralization of economic activities to the districts, if not to the local municipalities. And let me say that, as I reported in the House when I was here last, the government has also provided a lot of support, monetary support, to various companies, people, including cutting the Reserve Bank also has come on board, cutting the repo rates and so on. And we have all reprioritized our budgets so that we can deal with this fight. What the government has now done is to make sure that as we ease the lockdown, the president said we mustn't ease it in a rushed manner because we may get a surge that we will not be able to deal with. So we've had to open up slowly. Why? Because on one hand, we have to save lives. We would like to have as few people as possible that we can avoid die from this. We don't want to have massive deaths. This country during the Spanish flu lost more than 300,000 people. almost within 6 weeks around the Black October. We don't want that situation. So we have to balance saving lives, but at the same time, we have to balance livelihoods. So it's balancing saving lives and saving livelihoods. And that's why we are gradually opening up the economy and matching that with the readiness of the health services. And so we moved from the hard lockdown, which we may call level 5, to level 4, opening up slowly the economy. And now we're at level 3, where we've pretty much opened up most of the economy. And we are going to enhance level 3, where more parts of the economy is going to be opened, as the president announced. But at the same time, we have to stick to strict protocols, health protocols, so as to still minimize the spread of the virus. Of course, as we have been doing that, we've faced many challenges. Challenges like funerals have proven to be a place where transmission takes place very easily. And that is why the funerals are restricted to only 50 people with very strict health protocols. That is why also interprovincial travel is still not allowed, except for those who are going for work, but not for leisure, and those who are going for funerals. Because if you look at the economic hubs, they are also the areas where the infection is highest. They are where the population, majority of the population is. So if we allow free movement between these hubs and the rest of the country, we'll find that the hotspots will not only be in those economic hubs, but it will spread right through the country. So that's part of the reason. And also social gatherings are still not allowed for that reason, that we have to be able to manage this pandemic. So through various levels, we have carefully listened to the challenges and proposals that have come from the people as well. It's not like government has just decided on its own. We've listened to people. And sometimes even when we have regulations, if there are challenges that are raised by the communities, which we may have overlooked because this is the first time we're dealing with this, as the president says, it's like crossing a river. You feel it as you cross. Sometimes you slip and falter. Sometimes you find firm ground. So we have been very flexible. Our regulations have been changing, amended according to the challenges that we face. But one of the big challenges that we're facing now, because a lot of people have not been able to pay the municipalities for services. Municipalities are not able to collect, even those that were able to collect easily before. If we take the city of Joburg, I'm sure they will speak for the province, but if we look at Joburg, it has lost a lot of its revenue, whereas it used to collect almost 80% just before the lockdown. Now it's collecting very little. So this is going to be a big challenge for us. We've discussed this with government, and we hope that part of the 20 billion will assist, but probably it won't be enough. The other challenge I want to highlight is the litigation. The government has had more than 90 cases Some of them we've settled out of court, some of them we've won, some we've not, others are still ongoing. And interestingly now, there are those who are saying we should not have used the law we've used, we should have gone on the state of emergency. Others are saying everything we've done is unconstitutional. Others, but on the other hand, there are those who are saying we're reckless, we've moved too fast, we shouldn't have moved from level 4 to 3, and we shouldn't have opened the schools. So it's an interesting combination now. One side they say
Minister.
in the
I know, Minister, that I should not be disturbing you as such, but your time is running out.
oh, okay, I'm about to round off. So those are some of the challenges that we are facing, but we still have to make sure that we continue until we defeat this. And in conclusion, I just want to reiterate what the President said, that because there is still much that is unknown about this virus and the manner of the spread in our population, it is important to take measured and incremental steps. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. So honorable members will now proceed to the next speaker, Minister of Trade and Industry, Honorable Patel.
Minister.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chairperson, Minister Dlamini Zuma and Deputy Minister Joe Pashla, Chief Whip, Honorable Mohai, honorable members. Thank you for the invitation to participate in the debate on government's response to the COVID pandemic. My colleague, Minister Dlamini Zuma, has set out the overall context of the pandemic globally and the response that was put in place by Cabinet in South Africa when the first local infections became clear. Honorable members, I want to build on her remarks and look at a few of the economic interventions. I want to frame my response with introductory observations that this pandemic is serious with significant loss of life and that it's being taken seriously by policymakers across the world, that our actions as a country have been bold and appropriate to the scale of the crisis, and that the combination of measures to slow down the pandemic or flatten the curve and get society ready for living with the virus until we have a vaccine have yielded positive results in the first 100 days. The range of economic and related actions have been extensive. These actions together have sought to limit the loss of life and provide the greatest possible protection to citizens. They also lay the foundation for the measures we will need to take to address the economic reconstruction our country needs. Honorable members, in the available time, I wish to briefly highlight 10 areas where government sought to address a crisis that was sudden, unexpected, and unprecedented in recent history. The first action was to undertake economic impact surveillance, identifying the key risks and challenges we faced with the pandemic and later the lockdown, so that our responses could be based on the best available evidence. We surveyed the impact of the pandemic on other economies and the projections by leading public and private sector economists here in South Africa. These examine the impact on different sectors of the economy, on exports, on growth, on jobs. It enabled government to develop a range of responses, some of which I will briefly highlight. The second area of work, honorable members, was to work with the private sector and finance agencies to secure essential health stocks. This is a medical pandemic. Confronted with the need for personal protective equipment and medical devices, we developed an integrated health stocks database. And we worked closely with local industry to repurpose the production machinery of our country to make face masks, hand sanitizers, surgical masks, and gowns, and of course, basic ventilator machines. Let me take the example of medical grade face masks. We have been able to ramp up production by 6 million additional masks a month, virtually doubling the local production capacity in less than 3 months. And this has provided a secure and stable source of personal protective equipment to frontline healthcare workers. Similarly, we are now developing and building a locally designed ventilator machine that can be used in hospitals during the pandemic, with production of 20,000 CPAP ventilator units as the immediate goal. I give these as examples of the kind of things that we needed to do to rapidly tool up for a crisis that was unexpected. We granted the healthcare sector exemption from some provisions of the Competition Act to enable public and private hospitals and professionals to share information and personnel and coordinate their responses and their stocks of medical supplies. Government introduced export controls on critical medical supplies so that we could assure supply to the local market and to neighboring countries. And working with key partner countries, we also secured scarce medical supplies from elsewhere in the world. And locally, we launched industrial policy interventions through the National Ventilator Project. The third action I want to highlight was our efforts to ensure food and basic goods supply lines from the farm to the shop so that we avoid food shortages in the country. This was done in partnership with farmers, with workers, and with manufacturers, and collaboration with grocery and food retailers. A team of public officials helped to troubleshoot the challenges and difficulties experienced during the period in supply lines. We partnered with retailers to ensure that there was a stock of basic goods, that measures were in place at every store to address panic buying, that store safety protocols were put in place, and we introduced measures dealing with pricing. The fourth area of focus of government was the various measures to mitigate the economic impact on workers and firms. What the pandemic was, it created both a supply challenge and a demand challenge, not only in our economy, but across the world. A supply challenge because factories and workplaces closed, a demand challenge because people were not buying because incomes were reduced. On the 21st of April this year, President Ramaphosa, of course, announced a 500 billion rand coronavirus set of measures to direct resources towards fighting the pandemic. Honorable members will be familiar with it, but just to highlight, 100 billion rand was set aside to support workers' wages and assist companies in distress, 17 billion rand in cash flow relief or direct payment to businesses and individuals through a 4-month holiday for companies with skill development, levy contributions, fast-tracking VAT refunds, a delay in filing and payments of carbon tax, and so on. Some 200 billion rand was made available through a loan guarantee scheme in partnership with major banks, Treasury and the Reserve Bank. And support was given to small business and spaza shop owners and other small and medium enterprises. These measures, of course, address the sudden drop in aggregate demand for South African goods and services, and they sought to inject liquidity into the economy so that the negative effect would be moderated. The fifth area and action, honorable members, was developing a broader solidarity within society and social protection measures to assist the vulnerable. It included the initiative that led to the establishment of the Solidarity Fund, which is an independent structure that mobilizes the public behind efforts to buy PPEs, to provide basic support to vulnerable communities, and communicates the message of social distance and responsible behavior. These were complemented by temporary social grants and increases in social grants to citizens and funding of the activities of local municipalities for COVID interventions. A sixth area was action by regulators to support and facilitate cooperation to keep firms in businesses. They included special measures and exemptions from competition legislation to enable deeper collaboration and working together, even of competitors. For example, an exemption was gazetted to enable the banking sector to meet together to discuss possible customer payment holidays for clients of banks who had a sudden drop in income. The tenants of retail landlords were able to meet to discuss rent deferment or reductions in rent and limits to evictions of store owners. The hotel industry was able to meet to enable quarantine sites to be identified and made available to government. The Competition Tribunal rules were amended to fast-track cases on excessive pricing, and the CIPC, which is our Company and Intellectual Properties Commission, issued a practice note on reckless trading to enable firms to stay open in these unusual circumstances. The seventh action was the various measures to protect consumers against unfair price rises. Honorable members will recall that shortly after the state of disaster was declared, government put in place regulations covering what is called price gouging and excessive pricing. They included a range of goods and services, such as basic food and consumer items, emergency products and services, medical and hygiene supplies, and emergency cleanup products and services. A toll-free complaints line was put in place, and the competition and consumer regulators immediately sprang into action. About 180 complaints and cases have been or are currently being investigated for various overpricing offenses. Of those that were completed, honorable members, the Competition Commission imposed fines and other payments on 21 companies over the period, totaling more than 13 million rand. The National Consumer Commission imposed penalties on 4 companies for overcharging consumers. I move then to the 8th area of work of government, and that was to work with other countries across the globe on coordination and engagement. The President led efforts to engage global leaders at the G20 and the African Union to ensure that developing countries had access to basic medical support and that global institutions like the World Bank and others inject funding into slowing economies. I held meetings with trade ministers, both at the G20 and the African Union, to ensure that coordinated responses were developed. We engaged with trade ministers of our immediate neighbors to address challenges with the flow of goods across borders and to identify practical solidarity with each other during the pandemic. The 9th area was to manage the lockdown and the reopening of the economy through a risk-adjusted approach. The work on this area helped to slow down the movement of people whilst maintaining essential and critical economic services, buying the country time to flatten the curve and ensure that our health systems were not absolutely overwhelmed. A system with 5 risk levels was developed, and detailed work took place to identify the sectors which could reopen as soon as possible. Minister Dlamini Zuma, of course, played a critical role in the gazetting of these regulations that enabled us as South Africa to calibrate the level of risk with the level of economic openness. And together with these risk systems, government also developed protocols and social compacts with individual sectors to address ways of lowering the risk on workers and the public. And they included social distancing, the 1.5 meter rule, to redoing clocking in arrangements at factories, providing sanitizers at workstations, shifts, changing the starting time of businesses to relieve pressure on taxis and public transport, and of course, getting the wearing of masks in the workplace, in the canteens, and on public transport. The 10th and final area is our work to lay the foundations of a post-COVID economy. We cannot go back to the pre-COVID economy. We must take the opportunity now to build a more inclusive, dynamic, and jobs-rich economy that the vision of the Freedom Charter entails. This work on the new economy is ongoing and involves identifying new industrial and economic opportunities that we need to utilize. They include essential goods production and local industrial value chains. We cannot go back to Africa as a continent, South Africa as a country, being dependent on critical supplies coming from elsewhere and leaving our people potentially vulnerable when there are disruptions in supply chains. So we are looking at new opportunities with the production of medical supplies, including pharmaceuticals and medical equipment. They also include new urgency in our infrastructure drive, repairing social damage with the construction and maintenance of health infrastructure, of housing, of sanitation, water and roads, and identifying the local inputs that go into that infrastructure program, like cement, bricks, steel, paints, and equipment. They include promoting industrial dynamism. We have to put more effort into skills development, innovation, and productivity. Agile companies will survive and prosper in the post-COVID period. And we need to develop that agility, particularly that young people bring that to the economy. And building a greener economy using new technologies like batteries and fuel cells, retrofitting our businesses and homes, and tapping into global funds. They include building on the digital technologies of which this virtual meeting is an example, and ensuring it's open to small business and township enterprises. And they include speeding up our work on African integration with continental supply chains and greater levels of industrialization. And they must have as a big focus the issue of economic inclusion and transformation, strengthening cooperatives, small and medium enterprises, and township enterprises with measures to mainstream women, youth, and Black South Africans in the economy. Above all, the work is about building state capacity towards a new entrepreneurial developmental state to drive our work, to build on the examples of the state moving with speed, with energy, and in partnership with our people. As I conclude, Chairperson, I want to recognize our response as government has been characterized by the deeper partnership, working with portfolio and select committees. And let me recognize the role of the NCOP members on the select committee dealing with trade, industry, and competition in our engagement with provinces through bilateral discussions and sessions of the Presidential Coordinating Commission and various MINMECs, and on meetings and work sessions with business, with labor, community organizations, and religious organizations. Our democracy has indeed risen to the unusual and serious challenge of the pandemic. And though much needs to be done, we have shown that South Africans have the resilience and fortitude to address this challenge of our time. I thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Minister Patel. The next speaker is going to be Honorable D.R. Ryder.
Honourable Chairperson,
Yes.
Chairperson, honourable members, fellow South Africans, welcome to day 89 of lockdown. Considering the data and the modelling at the time, the national government reacted swiftly to follow many other countries into lockdown in response to the COVID-19 outbreak. The 3-week lockdown was well supported and compliance levels of up to 99% were reported. South Africans were on board, and as is so often the case, the nation united against this unknown threat. Goodwill was at an all-time high. And then the ANC's Politburo took over, and in an alarming display of authoritarianism, the state of disaster was manipulated into a full-blown, militarily enforced removal of the rights of citizens. Goodwill vanished as unilateral decisions were made. The president was overridden by a minister, and some alarming and irrational regulations were decreed. And here's the kicker. South Africans are not stupid. They need to be treated like adults. and yet we were treated like acolytes at an ANC branch meeting. This country has a history of unjust laws and authoritarian enforcement. I should not be the one who needs to lecture the ANC on what the likely response is to implementation of such laws. Martin Luther King once said, "One has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws." The credibility of government has been lost, the goodwill was squandered, and trust in government, and especially in the president, has been broken. What a pity, because the rule of law requires some respect from citizens. The rule of law was tenuous at best before lockdown and has now been dealt a telling blow. Police officers who should be responding to violent crimes have been relegated to high school prefects confiscating cigarettes from the naughty smokers. Really? This would have been a good time for community police forums and neighborhood watches to fill the gap. But these were stood down to ensure that the state held all the power. Bizarre. And the lockdown was extended. Data coming in started to disprove the early models, started to show that maybe smoking is not as big a risk as we thought. And the National COVID Command Council doubled down just to prove who is boss. Minister Mboweni told us that he had lost the fight to get the small wins of cigarette and alcohol sales reinstated. Mr. Kieswetter on the same day told us that the fiscus had lost 1.7 billion rand just in April since sin taxes were not being collected. Illicit cigarette sales were a problem long before the lockdown and the banning of smoking. Well, those sales received a giant shot in the arm from Minister Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. Apparently, because when people saw, they put saliva on the paper. You may as well have banned newspapers then. But really, Mr. Kieswetter and Mr. Mboweni are not the vanquished in that fight that the minister told us about. South Africa is. But it's not only the revenue that has been foregone from alcohol and cigarette sales. With the shutdown of businesses, profits have been slashed. So company taxes paid at the end of the current financial year will be badly affected. VAT has not been earned on transactions back and forth. There was little commercial traffic on the road, through ports, on railroads and through airports. And so the government margins of fuel have been badly hit. Toll collections have fallen to almost nothing. Airport taxes and so many other of the insidious ways of collecting revenue have ground to a halt. As businesses begin to struggle and close, it's not just the business owners and investors who feel the pain and actually have to join the unemployment queues. Employees have taken an absolute hiding. Many employees have had to accept reduced pay, some no pay, and those are the lucky ones that have kept their jobs. Even as the economy starts to reopen, the reduced spending power and continued restrictions mean that demand for most products is way, way down. Businesses are going to short time as a result in order to retain as many jobs as they possibly can while ensuring their own survival, hoping against hope that they make it to the recovery. Minister Patel spoke about a job-rich economy. I'm not sure where he's living, but the job losses from this shutdown are expected to exceed 7 million. That's 7 million more people having to hustle every day for their bread and their pop. 7 million less people paying income tax and UIF. 7 million more people needing help from UIF and SASSA, all coming out of the government coffers. 7 million people whose monthly expenditure has dried up, and it will affect their microeconomy and the whole South African economy drastically. Local government was already not making it. Municipalities have been using conditional grants and payments for utility services just to pay the salaries. Collection levels have since dropped under COVID-19 lockdown. Ekurhuleni's mayor, despite promising that he wouldn't serve under President Ramaphosa, is still around. He indicated that the reduced collection rate will mean a 1.2 billion rand shortfall in Ekurhuleni's budget. Wow, he may not even be able to afford his miracle cure for COVID-19 that he promised us. So in summary, the intention was to shore up our response to COVID-19. My colleague, the Honorable Bacha, will tell you how this has failed. Too few beds, too few ventilators, too little done over too long. And in the process, we killed the economy. Nothing coming in, too many demands, and too many new demands for money to go out. South Africa was in trouble before coronavirus. we are in desperate trouble as a sovereign nation after it. In conclusion, Mr. Chair, I tell you this now. I never want to hear government blaming the virus for our woes. We must blame the rampant theft by government officials and politicians for getting us into a position where we could not respond properly. And then we must blame the executive for allowing the NCCC to manage our response to the absolute decimation of our already broken economy. This is the bed made by the ANC, and now we must all lie in it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That was Honorable Ryder. The next speaker is going to be Gillian.
Honorable Chair,
10 minutes.
Honorable Chairperson, Ministers, Deputy Ministers, MECs, Representative of SALGA, Honorable Members, fellow South Africans. We commemorate the month of June as Youth Month. We remember the selfless and heroic youth of 1976 who fought and laid their lives for the fruits of our democracy. As we traverse through these difficult and uncharted times of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are equally clouded by a painful period where the percentages of femicide and gender-based violence are at an all-time high. In echoing the sentiments of our president, who coined this as the twin pandemic, we need the collective efforts of society to once again take on the fight and defeat an enemy that threatens our humanity. With the virus having arrived with such speed and uncertainty, we commend the National Department of Health for its bold and swift responses from the moment the announcement declaring a national disaster were made. Chairperson, if we look at the pandemic in our country, what we begin to observe is that every critical aspect of public health care plays a pivotal role in informing the capacity of the health sector to contain the virus and make direct links between
The table should really assist us to correct the situation. The member is no longer audible. Please assist.
Can you hear me, Chair?
Please proceed.
Thank you, Chairperson. And make direct links between the ability to contain the virus and the socio-economic impacts. If the capacity is low, we risk either losing many lives or be forced to put a complete halt on the economy and restrict all human interaction. Thus, the important balance of saving lives and livelihoods becomes important. Access to essential services remains skewed to urban areas with rural and farm schools, facing a lack of water and infrastructure. We must also unequivocally condemn the school break-ins and urge our communities to assist law enforcement agencies in apprehending the suspects in such incidents that stood at 1,577 schools by May 19, 2020. Communities should also treasure and protect these sites of learning. This pandemic requires us to rethink our schooling system and prepare our schools for the future and unknown pandemics. This will require an effective connectivity and full basic service infrastructure. The Department of Health and National Command Council have worked tirelessly to ensure that the spread of the virus is mitigated and to enable South Africa to take the necessary measures to fight this pandemic. As the ANC, we are extended to being informed of the important breakthrough in one of the therapeutic trials of COVID-19 management. The randomized evaluation, which have shown to be extremely promising and easily implementable in the country. This brings much needed hope to the many South Africans, and it is a development we will closely monitor going forward. During level 5 and 4, the Department of Basic Education introduced the COVID-19 Learner Support Program to promote learning and teaching across 123 radio stations and 6 television channels, reaching an audience of about 35 million. This is a demonstration of the department's commitment to ensure we don't lose the school year. The protocol required at all schools have provision of water, sanitation, sanitizing of classrooms, and availability of masks for all learners and staff. Temperature checks continue to be administered for learners and staff members. Those with raised temperatures will then be considered for isolation and testing. The Department of Basic Education went through an extensive consultation process with various stakeholders in the sector. Where is it? The department further extended its school reopening as part of the department's commitment to ensure all schools are COVID-19 ready. Chairperson, can you still hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Thank you. We should also commend the department's transparency and public accountability in the reopening process. The reopening of schools was successful as a result of schools meeting the school reopening protocol anchored by the principle to save lives. The department has ensured that all learners, educators, and support staff have received orientation and training at the start of the school reopening, commencing with grade 7 and 12 on the 8th of June 2020. Department of Basic Education has gazetted.
There's a bit of a problem now. I'm asking the table once again to please do whatever they can to assist here. Please proceed, Honorable Member.
The department has ensured that all learners, educators, and support staff receive orientation and training at the start of the school reopening, commencing with grade 7 and 12 on the 8th of June 2020. DBE has gazetted an updated school calendar that ends on the 15th of December. Even though there are instances of learners and teachers having tested positive for COVID-19, the department has prepared sufficient protocols to contain the spread of the virus. Some of the schools affected by the coronavirus have been closed and deep cleaned to ensure the continuation of learning. The COVID-19 pandemic comes at the
Then move to SM Faela. I'm told that Mr. Nata has withdrawn, so we'll move to Honorable SM Faela. It will have uthi nawo phefumula siyakwamukela.
Yes, Honorable Chairperson, thank you so much. Honorable members, government's response to COVID-19, which resulted in an unprecedented total lockdown on the 27th of March of our economy activity for the interest of health and safety of our citizens. Entering into lockdown, both government vital time to develop a strategy to contain the virus without transmitting, spreading out of control. Government gained sweeping and undemocratic power under the Disaster Management Act. Unfortunately, this power turned abusive and affected cultural and religious activities that have been part of daily living for centuries. It is reported, Chairperson, that a police personnel arrested people for breaking the social gathering regulation just for praying in numbers. This was not only excessive, but unacceptable and disrespect. We further witness police insult the dignity of people to throw away their food to be eaten by dogs. The most personal insult, Chairperson, to our constitution, constitutional values of dignity and freedom was to removal of Isikub Samakolo by police officials. The powers granted to government through lockdown has thrown away the respect for sacred cultural and religious activity and has angered the citizens of this country. Chairperson, we appreciate that government must be firm in its approach for the safety of all citizens, but call on government to act appropriately according to the crime. We believe that education is one of the best methods in trying to effect change in our society when living in the COVID-19 pandemic. Education will go a long way in bringing support over brutal force. Currently, we need education to play a more focused role in this pandemic and address the stigma associated with COVID-19. According to World Health Organization, social stigma in the context of health is the negative association between personal or group people who share certain characteristics and specific disease. Social stigma is equal to threat to government response to COVID-19, as people who may be affected by even suspect being infected may not wish to disclose their health condition and continue to socialize with people and not self-isolate. This becomes problematic, as places anyone who comes into contact at immediate risk. We call on government command center to pay attention to the following. 1, awareness and education regarding COVID-19. 2, encourage positive action in the part of individuals, youth, and committees. 3, setting up of a support mechanism in communities, especially involving the youth to assist the elderly. 4, finally, all activities of program to be broad-based and strictly non-partisan. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. As we ask Honorable S. Shlomuka, KwaZulu-Natal MEC for Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, to take the stage and speak. I'll now hand over the chairing to Winnie, Honorable Winnie Ngwe.
Thanks, Chair.
Hello?
Yeah,
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Honorable Chairperson. Greetings to ministers, deputy ministers, chief whip, and members of this august house. Chair, it is really a privilege to be called upon to contribute to this debate in the NCOP on such important subject as COVID-19 and our response to it as a government. We do this with the sober realization that this virus represents the biggest threat that we have ever faced as a democratic South African. Since the earliest day of the COVID-19 pandemic in KZN, and the South Africa's first case was incidentally diagnosed in KZN on the 5th of March 2020. And the KZN provincial government, of which I serve as an MEC for COGTA, has been a forefront of the effort to limit its spread to our communities. Inspired by the a bold action and a decisive leadership displayed by His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa and the Minister of Health, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, and the Minister of Cooperative Governance and International Affairs, Dr. Umama Nkosazana Dlamini, and the Cabinet at whole, Chairperson. The provincial government of KZN, under the leadership of the Premier Ukuzeni Ubabu Zikalala, has deployed all the available resources, both the human and the financial, towards the single goal, inflecting the curve in the province. Following the national declaration of the disaster on the 15th of March 2020, which was announced by the National Minister of COGTA, Umama Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, we promptly instructed all the government institutions in KZN, including municipalities and the traditional institutions, to limit their stakeholder meetings and the public gathering and educate and sensitize the communities about the implication of the declaration of the state of disaster, which included the national lockdown from the 27th of March 2020. Honorable Chair, in KZN, we can confirm that service delivery is not under lockdown while we are implementing a regulation by service delivery is not under lockdown. During these challenging times, we have worked closely with all stakeholders in the province, including the national government, departments, municipalities, traditional leaders, subs, social partners, NGOs, media, and communities themselves. We have been in the daily communication with all the decision makers regarding the latest pronouncement of the Provincial COVID-19 Command Council that is chaired by our Premier, Honorable Premier Uzikalala. Our goal was to ensure that everyone in government is on board and work towards in one goal to fight for COVID-19 as the coronavirus that is we're dealing with. We've instructed all the sector departments in the provincial government as well as municipalities to ensure that the basic services such as healthcare facilities, law enforcement, or the provision of water, electricity continue as before, because service delivery is not a lockdown in KwaZulu-Natal government. Chairperson. We also instructed leaders of these institutions to streamline their procurement procedures towards the provision of COVID-19 equipment, such as the PPEs, as well as the necessary maintenance and repairs of essential infrastructure. With regard to municipalities specifically, Honorable Chairperson, we assisted all mayors and municipal managers in the reconfiguration their conditional grant funding towards the fight against the virus, and in order to stabilize the municipal finance for these people who have facilitated the settlement of government debt owed to municipalities. We have also supported municipalities in revising their new budget to include COVID-19 allocation and further efficient savings, Chairperson. With COVID-19 being a primary medical emergency in our provincial Department of Health, we've done a sterling job in facilitating the operation of screening, testing, and quarantine sites across the province. Our law enforcement agencies have ensured that law and order during these challenging times. And as a provincial government, we have continued to distribute water tankers to areas with outstanding challenges in delivering of water to ease the pressure on distressed communities. Especially mentioned in this heroic effort must go to our Provincial Department of Education, which oversees a massive staff component and a large number of schools, many of them in remote rural areas. These schools have had to be prepared for the gradual resumption of teaching and learning, which now take place across the province in line with the pronouncement of the national government. All schools are being supported and monitored for the COVID-19 cases. We have also ensured, Madam Chair, from day one that our own provincial government employees throughout the KZN are protected from the virus in their respective workplace and sensitize all the associated risks as they discharge their duties. Our support has been wide-ranging and far-reaching, and it will continue to be so until the battle against COVID-19 pandemic has been won. Many provincial government employees provide essential services. We need to give them a necessary protection, Madam Speaker. Chair, I'm pleased to report that the government institution and all our key stakeholders in the province have heeded our call to action with all the agents it deserves. The Honorable Premier Zigalala and our MECs, mayors and traditional leaders have, from their various public platforms, called for the compliance with the wearing of masks, use hand sanitizers, social distancing, and wash hands with water and soap, and they need to disinfect our public space, such as government buildings. To present a full picture, I must also admit here, Honorable Chairperson, that the COVID-19 lockdown has hit our provincial economy hard, both in the formal and informal sector. To mitigate its negative impact, we've provided the support to both formally registered businesses and informal traders to receive emergency relief as per the pronouncement made by the national government. Our Department of Economic Development, Tourism, and Environmental Affairs have been spearheading effort to protect our economy during this difficult time. The issue of food security came to the forefront, and intervention by the Department of Social Development and Agriculture. Through this intervention, thousands of residents were provided with provided emergency relief to distressed communities in a form of a food parcel, Chairperson. Going forward, to mitigate the potentially closure of many local industries post-COVID-19, we will double down our support of infrastructure development as well as the support surviving industries. In practice, we will be facilitating completion of ongoing infrastructure projects while we work to attract investment and reduce unnecessary bureaucracy. All of these are momentary tasks that judging by the level of determination we've seen from our institution, I'm confident, Chairperson, that we will succeed. To recall another example of our collective commitment as a single cause, I will remind this August House Chair that our performance as a government during the 2010 World Cup was an early indication that as a country, we are capable of delivering a large-scale infrastructure project, managing events at a great complexity, and the insight we have gained from the COVID-19 pandemic should similarly help us to reimagine the way of our government institution operate in the future. Honorable Chairperson, looking to the future, we will expect greater efficiency from our government institution based on how we will have performed in the midst of the deadly pandemic that has simultaneously multiply our challenges and restricted.
You are left with 1 minute. You are left with 1 minute. Continue.
I'm finishing.
You are left with 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. The crisis management we have seen from our government institution must and will involve the better management in the future. We in KZN who are determined to view COVID-19 not only as a challenge, but also as an opportunity. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is Honorable S.A. Lutuli from Economy Freedom Fighters.
Thank you, Chairperson. Greetings to everyone. House Chairperson, to schedule the National Council of Provinces in terms of Rule 84 to discuss government response to COVID-19 pandemic when there is no response to speak of. Sibonile ngamehlo ethu kanye nesipiliyoni sabanye abaningi emphakathini yethu ukuthi akukho mpendulo kahulumeni. Abantu bakithi eMtobatoba, eKhayelisha, eThoyandou, eNkomazi, eSoshanguve, eMafikeng nasematatiyela bazibonele ngokwabo. Iqembu elibusayo selinqume ukuthi inzuzo ibaluleke kakhulu ukudlula izimpilo zabantu baseNingizimu Afrika. Sizibonele kulesi sihlandla sokuqala eWestern Cape sokuthanjiswa kwemigomo ye-COVID-19 ibulala abantu ngamakhulukhulu. Ubufakazi balokhu bubonakele eGauteng njengoba izinombolo seziqala ukukhuphuka, kepha bafuna abantu babuyele emabhayisikobho ezindaweni zokudla. Futhi maduze nje uzobona lo hulumeni ophethe usunikeza abantu ilungelo lokuthi baye ezinkundleni zemidlalo, kumashisanyama, emicimbini nasemakhonserthini emiculo. Akukho mpendulo kahulumeni kulolu bhubhane lwe-COVID-19. Abantu bakithi babodwa futhi bazofa ngamakhulukhulu. When we went to job Shimankara Tsobana Hospital in Rensburg, we saw oxygen tanks are empty at suction points. There are not enough trained nurses to treat patients on ventilators, and the hospital is generally dirty. In fact, dirty is not a word, it is filthy. For years, National Chairperson, the Provincial Department of Health has neglected izibhedlela zabantu abangaphilile ngokwengqondo kwizifundazwe zonke. Bangaphezu kwamakhulu abasebenzi ezibhedlela zabantu abangaphilile ngengqondo abatholakala be-tested positive. Izibhedlela zitholakala zingenamanzi neziguli zitholakala ukuthi yizo ezithatha amabhakede ihambe ziyothutha for weeks, and amaklinikhi amaningi akanawo ama-PPEs. There is no response by the Northwest Provincial Government. We went to hospitals in Northwest, and then we saw that workers are on strikes, and because of high rates of infection and the lack of protection clothing. There is no government response by Free State provincial government. Right here in Western Cape, House Chairperson, workers operating ambulances in Khayelisha Hospital do not have PPEs. In particular, A40 suits, and this has been the case from the day of the first case that was discovered in South Africa. What is even worse, Chairperson, is that here in Western Cape Provincial Government, since the government realized that i-COVID-19 ibulala abantu bethu abamnyama kakhulukazi koKhayelisha, eGugulethu, eNyanga, eMfuleni, eLanga, eHarare nasePhilippi, ekubeni ama-communities abantu abamhlophe, iy'namba zabantu abashonayo nabantu aba-infected zincane, badecide ukuthi i-economy ayivulwe. They want the people who are mostly affected to travel in taxis, trains, and buses, and every day to come and clean their shops, their houses, and their offices. So that's when bezokwazi ukuthi bahlale kahle bejabulile. Yet abantu bethu bayafa, move from province to provinces, beyongcwaba abantu babo, baze bofika ko-Eastern Cape. There is no absolute response for Western Cape provincial government, Chairperson. Chairperson, ngeke sesikwazi ukuhlala sikhohlise abantu baseNingizimu Afrika sithi uhulumeni uyazi wenzani. This is not only the case of public health or health sector in general. In Free State, in Northwest, in Western Cape, and even in KZN, people are also dying. And in other provinces, the numbers are growing. The Minister of Culture, she has allowed herself to be bullied by people who funded the ruling party president election campaign to allow sales of alcohol. The Premier of Eastern Cape is correct to say that decision was short-sighted, and one of the main reasons the healthcare in the province has collapsed is because of the sale of alcohol. The Minister of Culture, if was not bullied, and if the cabinet was not bullied, why would we allow the alcohol to be sold when we are in the peak of the pandemic, which is expected to come in the next weeks? UNgqongqoshe wezohwebo nezimboni uma lapha futhi ukukhuluma sengathi iNingizimu Afrika inenqubomgomo yezimboni ehlanganisiwe nehlanganayo. Wayengungqongqoshe wezokuthuthukiswa komnotho kusukela ngo-2009 futhi wabusa iminyaka eyishumi engasho lutho. Namanje umile la akasho lutho. Every year when he was a Minister of Economic Development during budget debates, he will speak like there was something they are doing, and he is doing exactly the same thing. But deep down, the trade and industry is all talks and no action. Akukho ukukhula komnotho, akukho umsebenzi, akukho zimboni ezintsha, futhi akukho mnotho akhuluma ngawo. Ishumi leminyaka akasho lutho. Now we are exporting everything from simple masks, surgical gowns, and even A40 suits that ambulance drivers in Khayelitsha do not have, before it takes forever to be shipped from China. The announced social grant, including the basic grant for unemployment people, were announced without preparations. The economic stimulus package was announced without proper details, and we still don't know who benefited from 500 billion besides big businesses and banks. Ukukhululeka okwamenyezelwa kosomabhizinisi abancane kwaba ukwehluleka okudumazayo njengoba abantu basemakhaya basemalokishini bengatholanga lutho. Konke ukungenelela nokuthembisa abantu bakithi ukuthi bazonikezwa amanzi nokuthutha kwendle kuholele ukuthi lo hulumeni osiholayo adle imali antshontshe and athenge amathanki amanzi ngamanani aphindaphindiwe ashayisa nangamahloni. The truth of the matter is that there was no government response. Our people are on their own. Nezimpilo zabo sisezandleni zabo. Njengoba imigomo yokuvala kwezwe kuthanjisiwe ngokungenangqondo futhi nalo hulumeni engenazo impendulo, izimpilo zabantu baseNingizimu Afrika zisezandleni zabo. Kahle kahle sihlalo kufuze ukuthi angabe namhlanje sihlangene sizobuza uhulumeni ukuthi kungani engasinikeza impendulo, ngoba njengamanje uthuli nabo minister bakhe nabo MEC bakhe bathuli bazodlala ngabantu baseNingizimu Afrika. Siyabonga.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is Honorable P. Ramathuba from Limpopo MEC Health. Honorable P. Ramathuba.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Malebongwe.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Very well.
Oh, thank you.
You can speak, Mama.
All right, thanks.
MEC.
Chairperson. Okay. Chairperson of the NCOP and Deputy Chair, Minister Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma and Minister Ibrahim Patel, our Deputy Minister of Health, Dr. Joe Phaahla, Honorable Member, delegates from all provinces. Let me thank you, Chair and Deputy Chair, for allowing us a platform to debate and exchange ideas on the response of our government to the coronavirus pandemic. It's always an honor for some of us to find ourselves as a province to participate in any debate in this August lawmaking chamber. Honorable Chairperson, today marks exactly 100 days. Limpopo as a province is recording its first positive case of SARS-CoV-2, the novel virus responsible for the current devastating coronavirus diseases of 2019, or what is popularly known as COVID-19. Since then, we have, as a province, registered a cumulative number of 583 cases, which represents 0.6% of the total confirmed cases in our country. 270 cases have since completely recovered, while 308 remain active cases under isolation as we closely monitor them and observe them. 5 of those are admitted in our public facilities, isolation ward, and ICU. That includes a 65-year-old with comorbidity and a 2-month-old baby. 7 patients are admitted in different private facilities across the province. This new 583 reflects 18 new cases that we have registered in the province in the past 24 hours. And this, Honorable Chair, it's a reflection of an indication that indeed, as a province, we are starting to approach the well-spoken about surge. Because if you remember, we were one of those provinces that can go for 3 days without even registering a case. But what we are currently seeing this past week, it's in a day we can register up to 74 cases. Regrettable, as a province, we've already registered 5 COVID-19 related deaths. And of course, in terms of the total number of those who are infected, who are frontliners, we have recorded 28 of those who are infected, being 22 professional nurses and 6 doctors. While 20 of them, the good news is that they have already fully recovered. The truth is that the novel COVID-19 caught all nations of the world with lowered guards and thus unprepared. It has also exposed the manner in which healthcare has been funded across the board, the globe. And the inequality in terms of access to quality or to health care has also been exposed. This truth should, Honorable Chair, however, serve as a lesson, as a lesson for us to be vanguard ready for such similar pandemics in future. It also confirmed that as a nation, our plans to implement national health insurance is the correct plan, and we are on the correct path to correct this inequality in provision of healthcare, which is nothing else but a basic human right, and no one must be denied the access. Honorable Chair, the coronavirus brought with itself the real and inherent potential to infect millions of our people, kill thousands of our people, destroy the economy, and bring about total chaos. It was the leadership choices we adopted which saved us from the total disaster. In this regard, allow us as a province to pay tribute to the wisdom and the leadership of President Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa, his cabinet, to single out our minister, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, and also the minister, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, including the entire cabinet, members who sit in the command council, which one would not single them as individuals, but they both took an unpopular decision prioritizing the lives of our people instead of the current criticism that they continue to receive. We know that as leaders, that's what we are expecting, that there are people who do nothing but wait for you to do something and will always have criticism. We all appreciate that COVID-19 is a new virus that none of us knew anything about, and we learn every day, and we learn from it, and we continue to do that. Limpopo Provincial Government, through its Provincial Command Council, led by our Premier, Chupu Stanley Matavata, took advantage of level 5 lockdown and prepare for a surge. Ours has always been that of a pushback strategies, aiming that at all times our rate of infection must remain minimal. In that way, our healthcare system will be able to cope. The Premier on the 6th of May launched a surge plan which focuses on making sure that we deal with the virus from a community level. The first approach that he did launch was our household preparedness, wherein more than 10,000 community healthcare workers will be deployed throughout a community, and they've already started that work. Each one has been assigned 160 households where they will spend time screening them for COVID, also doing household profiling, and also training our people on how to do simple household isolation and quarantine. We are learning from our grannies and our ancestors that indeed household quarantine and household screening was long there within our communities before the missionaries brought the Bible. We knew long before we could be colonized that when a woman gives birth, there will be a randavel which is identified by our own traditional midwives, where she will be kept for 3 months with the baby. Only elderly people will be allowed access to her and the baby, because they were reducing infections on the baby, because the baby's immune system was still weak. So the issues of household quarantine, we think we need to just go back to the basics and copy the model from our grannies. A child with measles would be isolated in a room so that they don't play with other children. But at the same time, a child with chickenpox was allowed to play with others so that we can get herd immunization on other children. This is the work that our people have been doing long before we could come and talk about the current Western medicine that we have. So as a province, we've adopted that particular model to say, we're going to reach a stage wherein, as the number of infections continue to increase, our people must be empowered such that they know the vulnerable gets to be quarantined in the similar way they used to quarantine in the past. We know that in our villages, we've got different houses. In our township, we've got back rooms. So we want to do the same approach we use to defeat TB, to say, let's empower communities and don't wait for the state to provide with facilities for isolation and quarantine, because it's gonna be very difficult. We are also saying, to support this program, we are deploying 1,000 professional nurses. We've already appointed 587. The process to appoint the remaining one is undergoing. We receive a boost when the Treasury allocated funds for us to appoint those. The professional nurses, their task, each nurse will be assigned 10 community healthcare workers. Their task is to make sure that they support the community healthcare workers. While community healthcare workers will be doing all those work of household profiling and screening, the professional nurse must come in. They are all being provided with glucometers to test your blood glucose, your blood pressure machines, your cholesterol machine, malaria screening test kits, because Limpopo, mainly Vembe and Mupani are malaria endemic. TB also, they will be doing the test for that, and also HIV and AIDS. We're doing this because in the process, we
1 minute left.
Those and
1 minute
throughout. We are also assigning 100 GPs that will be supporting. One GP will be looking after each and 10 of those professional nurses. The other one is a facility preparedness, which is the well spoken about, wherein we're looking at our ICU beds. They were at 54, now we are at 310. We're looking at our also the other beds. Now we are already at 2,803. Our target is 8,013. But we're saying if our community-based approach wins, we will not reach this, and it's cheaper, and it will make sure that the virus remain at minimum. I must indicate that this has not spared a chairperson, my colleagues in the other sector, wherein, as we've indicated, we have seen a serious challenge. Limpopo is
Thank you, Honorable Member. Your
depends
time is
on the mining. Thank you.
Thank you, MEC.
Malibongwe.
The next speaker is Honorable M.R. Paha from Democratic Alliance. Honorable Paha.
Thank you, Chairperson. Honorable Chair, honorable members, fellow South Africans. Let me first take this opportunity to pass our sincere condolences to the family of MP Thandi Mpambos Bukwana, who passed on Friday last week. She served in the NCOP from 2014 to 2019, and after 2019 elections, went on to serve in the National Assembly. May her soul rest in peace. The outbreak of COVID-19, Chairperson, and the subsequent pronouncement of national disaster and national lockdown by President Ramaphosa was supported by all South Africans, irrespective of political persuasion. It is during these times that national interest is put before everything else. Rudolf Steiner has this to say, and I quote, "When human beings meet together seeking the spirit with unity of purpose, then they will also find their way to each other," close quote. We all bought into the idea of slowing down the spread of the virus and make all necessary attempts to flatten the curve. The visibility and hands-on approach of Minister Mkhize and some of his MECs gave a glimmer of hope that we had everything under control. However, the reality of the matter is that some of the MECs did not even know whether they were coming or going. In fact, some remain clueless up to this day. In the same breath, there are challenges that we are confronted with that have been there from the first day. The provision of personal protective equipment, PPEs, remains a hindrance in the fight against COVID-19. This continues to expose health workers to unnecessary risks. Some end up infected and others have lost their lives. This has also resulted in protest action by the same workers that are supposed to provide services to the general public. The delay in testing and test results backlog is a big problem for those tested individuals who end up not knowing their status for a while. The backlog also raises concerns how long the test specimen remains untested and whether it is still reliable once it reaches testing. It is for this reason that I therefore call upon the Minister of Health to find ways and means to increase the capacity of national health laboratory services in order to address the backlog and meet the demand of testing. It is quite alarming that the backlog is estimated around 70,000. Something drastic must be done. It is quite important that the continued care for the diseases and conditions continues to be taken care of even during coronavirus fight. Services to the public must continue to be provided. The peak of the spread of the virus is projected to be from July to September. It is important to take account of readiness by provinces during this period. This talks to the number of quarantine sites per province and the number of beds thereof. In the same breath, the service level agreement between Life Healthcare and provinces must be signed off as a matter of urgency to have extra capacity for the peak period. As the DA, we've been calling for the easing of lockdown regulations or a smart lockdown strategy. This was always misunderstood to be against the lockdown. We knew for a fact that a total shutdown would be disastrous in people losing their jobs and businesses ultimately closing. It is therefore quite interesting that I heard Minister Dlamini Zuma today talking about life and livelihoods, which is something that the DA has been saying all along. I must indicate, Chairperson, that most of President Ramaphosa's cabinet ministers have been exposed during this COVID-19 period. Some do not even have a clue of what is happening, talking against each other. If there's any reason for the president to consider a reshuffle, COVID-19 has provided reasons thereof. There are also inconsistencies with how provinces are operating. The regular visits by Minister Mkhize to provinces has been a positive highlight. What is still to be explained in the purchase of motorbikes, for an example, in the Eastern Cape, and how that helps in fighting COVID-19. This happens in a province with the worst road infrastructure and is predominantly rural. We want to make a call to the minister and the president that COVID-19 relief interventions are not for self-enrichment, fraud, and corruption. The theft of food parcels by public representatives, the 600 million for Jojo tanks, which translates to 66,000 per Jojo tank, and the 6 million rands that found itself going into an account of an individual from the UIF. It is something that needs to be investigated. Those responsible must be taken to task and face the full might of the law. We support all regulations that respect individual freedoms as espoused in the Bill of Rights and the democratic principles that our country is founded on. We might be in alert level 3. However, let's continue to observe social distancing, wash our hands with soap and water, and sanitize regularly. Wear a mask when in public, and more importantly, for those who can, stay at home. We owe it to each other to abide by these guidelines so that lives can be saved. We are all in this together. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is Honorable M.K. Muimang. Honorable Muimang, African National Congress.
Thank you, House Chair. Let me also take this opportunity to express my appreciation of the opportunity given to take part in the debate. Allow me to start by indeed appreciating a very important narrative from Wendell Holmes, who says that a great leader represents a strategic point in the campaign of history, and part of the leader's greatness consists of his or her being there. Indeed, Honorable Chair, the COVID-19 pandemic has created a health and economic crisis without modern parallel. In a matter of months, the virus has spread to almost every country and territory in the world, killing more than 400,000 people, profoundly disrupting the lives of millions and leading to an almost complete shutdown of all sectors of the global economy. The world is now in an economic recession of unprecedented depth, unique in character and uncertain duration. After locking down citizens and banning domestic and international travel, governments around the world have taken extraordinary steps to mitigate economic impacts, including providing enormous monetary and fiscal support to business and employees. This context is important so that those who are hammering on the intervention made by the government must be able to understand that our country and what is happening in our country is a microcosm of what is happening globally. In Europe, it was hit both early and hard by the crisis. In a short space of time, governments have taken on new and remarkable roles, both in providing economic relief and in regulating and restricting the private lives of citizens. I doubt whether Honorable Ryder is aware of this. In Africa's GDPs in 2020, it is estimated to fall by minus 1.7 in the baseline scenario, which assumes that the pandemic and lockdown would not last beyond the first half of 2020, and that all African countries will be affected. In the worst case scenario, growth is estimated to contract up to minus 3.4%. This is important so that Honorable Ryder and Baha understand where we come from. The direct impact of the pandemic on over 23 million already vulnerable workers in Africa would drive up the total number of people living in extreme poverty to 463 million in the worst case scenario as unemployment level jump. We do not know yet the full effects of the pandemic or how long this will last. However, the discussion about whether the scale of the crisis and the response to it could prompt a far-reaching re-evaluation of the role of the state in relation to the market. Critical to this is discussion around whether we must take direct interventionist role so that we're able to mitigate the devastating nature of the COVID-19 pandemic. According to the Stats South Africa, the business impact survey of the COVID-19 pandemic, which was released on 21st April 2020, found that there was profound disruption to our economy and that many South African industries are going through an adverse route. With the social and economic effects of the extended lockdown having devastating impact on the South African economy, already in a technical recession before the first case of COVID-19 was reported in the country in early March, the South African Reserve Bank is predicting a contraction of 6.1% on our economy. What this means is that because this is a reflection of a state of war, in our response, we should transcend conventional thinking and become more imaginative in using public policy instruments and financing mechanism to overhaul the flawed foundations of our country's social and economic structures. is also suggesting that we should also see the impact of COVID-19 as an opportunity to drive change. In our province, particularly around the district where I come from, Kurman, and our neighboring Kusmansberg, where mining is a cornerstone of the local economy. The lockdown has already hit hard, given the high levels of household vulnerability and pre-existing challenges related to food security. In addition to this, are those workers who have been allowed to return to work without being screened or tested. Just one mine called Limpopo, there is more than 50 positive cases reported in that mine. Of course, various measures were introduced from various departments. The Department of Small Business Development is assisting a total of 1,497 SMEs for funding in the value of 513 million through the SME Debt Relief Fund. But we have also seen the Department of Labor responding by committing 17 billion and also paying out 15 billion in COVID-19 relief benefits to 3 million workers. Each of these 3 million recipients have families and dependents. And also, it is also important to also note that the Tourism Relief Fund from the Department of Tourism has set aside 200 million grant supporting 400 SMEs. So therefore, it is important, Honorable Chair, that we note that indeed the global and national economic projections look extremely grim, with predictions of a global and national recession. But what is critical for us is that we need to have a plan for reconstruction and recovery, which must be treated like that of a post-war reconstruction situation. We need our economic strategy to go forward, and we require a new social compact among all role players. The meaning that we will have to forge a compact for radical economic transformation that ensures that we advance our economic position, particularly for women, for youth, and for persons with disabilities. What are the issues that we need to focus on? We need a program to expand social economic infrastructure. We need a program of investment to improve the performance of network industries. Thank you, Chair.
Can I listen to the point of order from Honorable Ryder? Honorable Ryder.
Thank you very much, House Chair. And Honorable Moimang, I apologize for interrupting you. Chairperson, I just want to know if it's parliamentary for Minister Dlamini Zuma to be on the phone in the House while we are having a discussion.
Honorable Miman, can you please continue?
Thank you, Chair. We need policies to strengthen trade and
Chair?
investment linkages with other countries across the African continent. We need skills development to ensure that we have the right expertise for capable private and public sector activities. We need to have a social compacting to achieve, in order to ensure that there is a buy-in around all three critical players: the government, business, and labor. Indeed, Honorable Chair, COVID-19 has created more policy space for progressive policies despite fiscal constraint. And as a result, we need to think carefully as to what are the key policy interventions to enhance the progressive intervention. We need to ensure that we come to grips with the fundamentals of political economy, that is the legacy of our political economy, that is the legacy of our tumultuous past. A significant area of weakness in our social and economic policy post the transition has been a very real underestimation of the structural underdevelopment we inherited from colonialism and apartheid. Honorable Chair, there is almost a resignation that these areas of underdevelopment are lost to the economy. Alongside this, there has been a tendency to an overestimation of a modernizing industrial economy's ability to correct such structural problems. Indeed, The answer is a developmental state that is buttressed by a long-term economic planning, that is buttressed by meritocracy, that is able to confront the structural nature and limitations of our economy. In conclusion, Chair, our government indeed has been there. The ANC-led government as a great leader has represented indeed that strategic point, and indeed it rose to the challenge, and indeed it was able to ensure that it is able to arrest the spread of the pandemic. It has put in place economic measures to be able to mitigate the damage and also to confront the structural constraints of our economy. Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is Honorable Cyril S. Mudlane from Salga. Over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson. It's Mondlane.
Mondlane.
Good morning. Yes, Chair.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairperson and Deputy Chairperson of the NCOP, Honorable Minister of COGTA, Trade and Industry, Honorable members of the NCOP. Good morning. Chairperson, our contribution as Salga in this debate is to highlight some key aspects of local government response to COVID-19, informed by the ongoing engagements between ourselves and member municipalities. Allow me to start off with an acknowledgement that local government, as the sphere of government closest to communities, has a critical role to play in curbing the spread of COVID-19, particularly as municipalities continue to deliver essential services such as water, electricity, waste removal, cleansing, amongst others. Municipal leadership, largely due to their proximity, also play a critical role in communicating and promoting awareness of COVID-19 amongst communities. One of the challenges which we cannot overemphasize, Chair, is the fiscal support to municipal response to COVID-19. In addition to providing the ordinary municipal services, the DMA regulatory directives have induced significant additional responsibilities and costs for municipalities in responding to the pandemic. Whereas these additional obligations have rather belatedly come with some financial support, it is still requiring municipalities to self-fund other related interventions and has placed a huge financial burden on municipalities, many of whom are already experiencing liquidity challenges. If having regarded all, Chairperson, for the current funding allocations, it is clear that with the expectations placed on municipalities, they would not be able to meaningfully curb the spread of the virus. In light of the financial constraints that municipalities experience, there was a sigh of relief when the President Ramaphosa, in his national address on the 21st of April 2020, stated that 20 billion will be allocated as part of a broader social package and intervention in responding to COVID-19. This intervention is highly welcomed to address cash flow and liquidity challenges in municipalities. Honorable Chairperson and members, I should also hasten to add that it is quite unfortunate that with some councillors alleged to have been involved in contravening the regulations, there are already doomsday prophets advocating that the 20 billion should not be allocated to municipalities as it would be spent on corrupt activities. There is really much work to be done as a collective to improve the image of local government and councillors in particular. It is clear to all that the national lockdown has resulted in job losses, reduced income that are impacting on municipal revenue, and as a result, municipalities have witnessed a reduced collection level and consequent to that, inability to meet their own financial obligations, such as ESCOM and water boards. There is no short-term solution in sight, Chair. Following the developments pertaining to COVID-19 and its impact on the country as a whole, as SALGA, we noted that the disconnection of electricity and interrupting water consumption of defaulting households will only worsen the current COVID-19-induced crisis. And as such, SALGA has then called on municipalities to suspend the disconnection of electricity and interruption of water for the duration of the period of the lockdown. We are, however, Honorable Chairperson, concerned with the reduced collection levels and financial constraints that municipalities are experiencing, and we may have to go back to municipalities and request that the normal credit control policies should be aggressively implemented. Whilst indications are that where water is provided during COVID-19 through tanks and water tankers, the impact for communities who were previously unserved is enormous, including improvement in access to water to vulnerable communities and improving frequency of water supply. We do, however, hold the respective view that the provision of water services to the poor and vulnerable is too big of a challenge to resolve with the provision of water tanks and tankers. Besides tanks and tankers placing a massive logistical management and financial burden on municipalities, it is more importantly raises expectation within communities which are not sustainable post the COVID-19 pandemic. We can only imagine the difficulties when the tank starts to run dry. Tanks and tankers must be regarded as an interim solution with more long-term and permanent solutions to be explored. While SALGA is encouraged by municipalities that are adhering to the range of directives issued by national and provincial government departments and the exemplary conduct of many councillors and municipal officials who go beyond the call of duty in service of communities, we note with utmost concern and disappointment the reports of some councillors acting in direct contravention of the regulations issued in terms of the Disaster Management Act, the Code of Conduct of Councillors and the values upon which our democratic state is founded. As SALGA, we condemn in the strongest terms this unlawful criminal behavior and have called upon the relevant municipalities to urgently initiate proceedings against such councillors and any other councillor who is found to be in breach of the Code of Conduct of Councillors. Should a councillor be found to be in breach of the Code of Conduct after following the municipal due processes, such a councillor may be removed from the office by the MEC responsible for local government. SALGA has also called upon the law enforcement agencies to continue to enforce the regulations without fear or favor, and similarly encouraged communities to partner with municipalities and report any councillors or municipal officials who are seen to be acting in a manner that violates the COVID-19 enforcement regulations to the relevant authorities. And this includes mayors, speakers of our municipality, without favoring anyone. Honorable Chair, as I conclude, we hope that the positive intergovernmental relations fostered across the three spheres of government over the past few months will propel us towards a coherent government for the people in the Republic. We are dealing with extraordinary circumstances which requires extraordinary actions and responses, and it is only by working together and ensuring adherence to the mitigation measures that we can collectively contain this pandemic and ensure the safety of our communities. I thank you.
Thank you, Mama Mondlane. Now I'll call the Deputy Speaker, Honorable Lucas, to take over.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chairperson. Good morning, members. We will immediately then go to Honorable Toy of the Freedom Front Plus to continue with the debate.
Thank you, Chair. The Guardian, 27 May 2020. 20 years ago, Nelson Mandela made an impassionate plea for the international cooperation on one of the greatest threats humankind has faced, close quotes. President Thabo Mbeki was an obstinate denial. This left a legacy of 300,000 preventable deaths. In March 2020, President Ramaphosa announced a 21-day national lockdown and a national state of disaster. The reason? To flatten the curve of infections and give South African health sector an opportunity to prepare for the worst. Government knew that they failed to provide adequate care for millions of South Africans, especially those infected with HIV and TB. They failed South Africa with COVID-19 again. The South African ANC-led government soft-soaped South Africans in thinking that the implementation of the lockdown was for the greater good, and that the lockdown was there to protect lives, livelihoods, and the economy. President Ramaphosa again proved that he was indeed an excellent mesmerizer and misled the nation to trust him. The late MP, Mario Ambrosoni, quoted President Ramaphosa talking of boiling a frog alive by raising the temperature very slowly. In a similar metaphor, the analyst John Cale Berman described Ramaphosa's approach as incremental and patient, rather than a big bang that frightens the frogs. This was a metaphor that was aimed at the minority of whites in South Africa. He allowed Minister Dlamini Zuma to institute draconic regulations that were said to prevent the spread of the virus and curtail infections. Small and medium businesses, non-BE compliant enterprises, bore the brunt of their devious plot to transform the economy. The dreaded phrase, radical economic transformation, was now being used more freely and being implemented as the new norm, not just an ideology. The ANC realized that they were losing political ground and are currently trying to redress all the injustices that they brought on South Africans as a result of 26 years of fraud and corruption that amounts to billions of rands. Government's reaction to COVID-19 brought about the following: escalating unemployment rate, state dependency to the majority of South Africans, and creating a racially divided society by deflecting their failures and gluttonous perversions to meet the political agenda. South Africans had to approach the courts to seek relief from the devastating and demoralizing regulations that destroyed so many South African futures and legacies. I put it to you, Mr. President, I put it to the South African government. We will not be discouraged by your legislation. We will not be overwhelmed by your suffocating doctrines. We have overcome the worst in the past, and we will prevail. Ons is 'n nasie wat bou en nie afbreek nie. Ons is 'n nasie wat ontwikkel en nie ontmoedig word nie. COVID-19 onderskei nie op die basis van ras en geslag nie. Pas op dat dit wat jy as 'n vriend en vertroueling ag, nie jou ondergang beteken nie. You mentioned on more than one occasion that you must use the tragedy to your advantage, referring to the COVID-19 pandemic. Beware, the snake you play with might cause your downfall. In closing, Chair, as 'n land, 'n nasie, 'n volk op sy knieë is dit nie noodwendig geteken dat hy verslaan is nie. Suid-Afrika kry sy krag by sy skepper om op die regte tyd gered te word. Ons sal nie mismoedig word nie. As als hopeloos lyk vir mense, is die omstandighede vir 'n wonderwerk op sy beste. Dankie, voorsitter.
Baie dankie, agbare de Toey. We will be now going to Honorable Bibi of the African National Congress. Over to you, Honorable Lindiwe Bibi.
Okay, thank you so much, Honorable Chairperson. Greetings to the Minister, Deputy Ministers, members of the Council, and special delegates of the province. The COVID-19 pandemic is a devastating event that none of us have seen in our lifetimes. The last pandemic that became global at such a speed was Spanish flu in 1918. As the soldiers who fought in the First World War returned, many of them suffered from a deadly respiratory disease. Spanish flu spread quickly to all of the regions of South Africa. In the rural of the Eastern Cape, it was called Umbatalala. When the stalwart of the African National Congress, Umama Nontsikelelo Albertina Sulu, was born in October 1918, her mother was infected with Umbatalala. Thankfully, the baby would become one of the greater leaders of our struggle, survived. The other hero born in that same year was the father of our democratic nation, Utatu Madiba. Chairperson, perhaps we could take some comfort from the Bible, which says in Timothy 1, chapter 4, verse 4, I quote, "For every created by God is good, and nothing is to be rejected if it is received with gratitude." I close quote. Our people have accepted with fortitude, discipline, and acceptance of our government's hard lockdown regulations in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We all know that South Africa remains one of the most unequal countries in the world, with urban areas strictly divided along racial lines. COVID-19 has exposed the high levels of inequality in our country. It is hitting South Africa, mainly black townships, harder than areas, particularly in the farmers' homelands regions, have impacted differently to the metros. Restrictions on movement and instructions of the social distances have been applied nationwide, but they have been almost impossible to follow for millions of our people. For residents in the townships like Eluruleni Township, KwaZulu Natal Townships, Khayelitsha in the city of Cape Town, health and sanitation have been a challenge. Government has installed communal taps, shared abusive facilities since 1994 in order to restore dignity to our people who were regarded as squatters by the apartheid regime. However, in the context of the COVID-19, these have become potential hub of infection. As the Minister of the Health has warned, coronavirus is extremely dangerous for a population like ours, with a large number of people with suppressed immunity because of HIV and TB and high levels of poorly malnutrition. Bakwethu, maqembu aphikisayo, le virus ayizanga nohulumeni wase-South Africa. Ngakho-ke asibambe sonke iqhaza ekulweni nale virus. Ebese ngibhekisa la ngiqhamuka khona e-KZN, lapho esiholwa umfana omncane, uPremier wethu, uSiphezikalala. Kuze uyibambe zaqina e-KZN. Sikubonile ekulweni nalesi sihlava nethimba lakho ugijima kuzo zonke iy'nkalo. Kwamakhona namakhona, usebenza imihlo namazolo. Kodwa ngiyaxakwa namhlanje Honorable Luthuli ethi nje uhulumeni wase-KZN akamboni enza lutho. Simbonile uLokuze nowakwaKhokha egijima namathange bakwethu, ekwazi ukuthi iy'kole nabantu nazo zonke iy'ndawo ukuthi zithole amanzi, ukuthi onke afake. Sagijima kuwo konke uzinkalo, uNomagugu emithini, kuzo zonke iy'bhedlele.
I'm sorry, Honorable Bibi. Honorable Bibi, can you give us a minute for a point of order? Honorable Luthuli, your point of order is? Honorable Luthuli.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. Honorable Bibi, yeah, my mother, she is leading the nation. That's the Premier of KZN is busy running around and giving service to the people. It's a lie.
So you decide for yourself, that is your order. Let us continue.
Ngiyabonga sihlalo, kunjalo kuyahlaba uma ngaba wehla wenyuka. Uzoyithola kanjani uhlele ekhoneni? Isiqubulo sethu-ke lese-KZN, Honorable Luthuli. Phuma ekhoneni ukuze ubone ukuthi wenze njani uhulumeni wakwaZulu Natal. Okukuhle ngokwaZulu Natal kunezinhlelo ezenziwe la ekuvakashelwa khona iy'kole ukubheka ukuthi zonke izinto zihamba kahle na. nokuthi futhi kube khona izihlelo ngikhuluma nje bonke abahlonishwa beseyinkalweni wena MEC wena sihlalo amakomiti kuyobhekwa amaklinikhi nezibhedlela ukuthi konke kuhamba kahle kusesimeni yini sisebenza thina as a collective. In the Western Cape, the township has become COVID-19 hotspots, suffering particularly high rates of infection. Nearly 12% of all infections in the Western Cape are Khayelitsha, even though it has just 6% of the province's population. The adjoining township of the Mitchell Plain has 9% of infection. In contrast, Stellenbosch, the heaven of wealth and privilege, has just 1% of Western Cape cases, whereas it makes up about 4% of the population, but this relatively low figure is distorting the disparities between Porterville Township and the rich suburbs and wine farms. Honorable Chairperson, when it comes to a highly contagious disease, being in the rural areas sounds better than being in a busy city, but that is a deceptive impression. Research has shown that smallholder farmers often are older persons and hence more vulnerable to the virus, and they have less access to health services. Chairperson, the most visible social impact of the COVID-19 are the increasing numbers of young men who stand in corners waiting to be picked up by contractors of piece jobs. However, the less visible impact includes the spike in gender-based violence, especially after the lockdown levels have been lowered. In this regard, government has focused attention in an interdepartment efforts. These include the appointment of social workers, of nurses, of volunteers having stipends, you name it, is all. That's how our government works. Wenza ukuthi yonke indawo engamakhona sikwazi ukuthi sifinyelele ukuze sikwazi ukuthi siqwashise abantu. Government has also implemented vital measures to support the workers, companies, and households that have been severely affected by the lockdown. The specially COVID-19 relief schemes of the Unemployment Insurance Fund paid out over 2 million workers in the first month. As the African National Congress, we welcome the efforts of government to ensure that our most vulnerable citizens are supported and protected during these difficult times. Government has processed over 5 million applications for the special COVID-19 grant of 350 rands a month for unemployed South Africans who receive on other form of assistance from the government. However, Chairperson, workers in the services.
Yes, conclude.
Okay, I'll conclude. The ANC welcomes the outstanding spirit of Ubuntu shown by the millions of South Africans in the space of 1 month of the Solidarity Fund raised over 2.7 billion in commitment from over 135,000 individuals. We also acknowledge the work done by the leaders of the political parties, religious and civil societies formations that have come together to assist the nation. South Africa is facing extraordinary times and enormous economic and social challenges. We believe that we have the human and the resources, the resilience, and the nation to overcome these challenges.
Thank you very much, Honorable Bibi.
To maintain the government. I thank you, Chairperson. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Bibi. Honorable Mase. The next speaker will be Honorable Mase Manapula of the Northern Cape MECL.
Malibongwe.
Honorable Manapula.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Chair. Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Chair. Let me greet the Honorable Chair and as well as Honorable Ministers and Deputy Ministers amongst us, the Honorable Chief Whip, Honorable Delegates, Permanent and Special Delegate, and SALGA Delegate. Good morning, or good day, it's good day now. Thank you for the privilege to address this August House to give an account on work done with regards to containment of the spread of COVID-19 in the Northern Cape Province. As a Northern Cape Provincial Government, we have no doubts whatsoever that our efforts as a country in terms of implementing the recommended strategy to flatten the curve and slowing down the rate of transmission is well on track and bearing positive fruits. Honorable Chairperson, allow me to remind the House that a few months ago, government outlined different stages of South Africa's COVID-19 response plan. And it must be noted that stage 1 was focused on preparation, which is community education, establishment of laboratory capacity, early surveillance. Stage 2 focused on primary prevention, including social distancing, hand washing, social closing of schools. Stage 3 was introduction of national lockdown and intensifying curtailment of human interaction. Stage 4 focused on surveillance and active case finding, including door-to-door screening testing that meets the criteria isolation and contact tracing. We are now at stage 5, which focus on managing hotspots, including surveillance to the identifying hotspots, spatial monitoring use cases, as well as outbreak investigation and intervention teams. At the same time, introducing stage 6, which focus on providing increased medical care during peak and pandemic, which is expected starting at end of August onwards. Honorable Chairperson, we also wish to attest that national lockdown has assisted us as a province to implement screening and testing, including contact tracing, successfully. It has also enabled us to mobilize extra resources to hospitals and clinics and increasing our testing capacity. To depict a clear picture as a province, by yesterday, 22 June, the total number of people screened on more than one occasion for COVID-19 in the province was slightly above 1.6 million, with over 19,000 tests done, of which only 254 people testing positive. From these positive cases, only 112 people have recovered and 1 person demised, and 2 people transferred out to provinces with active COVID-19, and 1 of returning back to his home province. This leaves the Northern Cape with 138 people with active COVID-19. Honorable Chairperson, the notion that has been purported that the Northern Cape is not doing enough in terms of testing is not factual. This notion has been made a few weeks ago about low testing numbers of the Northern Cape, but on the 24th of May, our number of testing per 100,000 people was 409, which already placed us as number 5 in the country. Upon the latest statistics, we have tested 1,203 people per 100,000 population, which is increase of about 300%. And this places our province in the mid-table of comparison with other provinces. Thus, we are confidently indicating the factuality that we are doing well as a province with regards to testing. Our prevalence in the province is currently at 18.9% 100,000 population. This again places us at middle table range comparatively with other provinces in the country. In examining the COVID-19 statistics in the Northern Cape, we appreciate that has normally been an attitude normally played an unexpected role in mitigating the spread of the pandemic. First of all, the extremely sparse population and vast distance between settlements has naturally slowed the pace, as we know that relatively congested areas there there's a greater tendency of accelerated spread and increased challenges containment in population mobility. Secondly, the fact is small population size of the province, which has tended to make tracing and contacts relatively more manageable. All this does not take away from the need to pursue it and our effort relentlessly by ensuring that nevertheless provides unique context of management of COVID-19. Honorable Chairperson, as part of managing hotspots, we are clear as which district or sub-district meets the criteria to vigilance and emerging hotspots. Just to cite an example, 4 weeks ago, at the week ending 30th of May, 2020, one of our potential hotspots, which is Ronosterbeek sub-district, had an incident rate of about 150 cases per 100,000 population. Our swift response on contact tracing, isolation, quarantine have made us in a week to reduce a point that we have incident rate of 0 for the past 2 weeks. This clearly shows that effectiveness strategy adopted by our country. Honorable Chairperson, with regards to contact tracing, we can confirm that from the 254 people tested positive, we have recorded in our province 1,652 contacts out of the total of 1,654 were traced successfully. This translates to 99.9% successful tracing of contact tracing. It clearly displays that we are doing well with regards to contact tracing, which is closing down the spread of the containment of the virus. When it comes to the bed modeling, we are preparing 2,076 general beds and 71 critical care beds with ventilators for COVID-19 patients during the peak surge. General bed capacity across the province is 1,358 general beds, working towards increasing the capacity before the peak. We will also be setting up a minimum of 81 ICU beds with ventilators as a start. At this point in time, we have identified 25 quarantine sites with a total capacity of 2,737 beds available. This has made us possible by collaboration with the mining sector, municipality, departments of roads and public works. We can further confirm that this state-of-owned facility made available to reduce the cost of implication in our province. Honorable Chairperson, in summary, we have seen a significant increase in COVID-19 cases in our province, which can attribute to the following amongst the others. Increase in screening results in more or people presenting symptoms referred to COVID-19. The other routine that we have done is routine testing being implemented in the private hospitals, including public health facilities, for a patient being admitted irrespective of health condition. This gives us a good snapshot of assistance as to ensure that we target approach in relation to screening and testing, as well as management and intervention of emerging hotspots and hotspots in our province. Increased numbers of newly confirmed cases in the past weeks resulted in the rigorous contact tracing, where most contacts went to testing privately despite of showing no symptoms. Routine tests among healthcare workers at facilities as part of our in-house strategy to ensure that our staff are well looked after. We have initiated testing regime where we're all doing baseline tests at all healthcare workers, and afterwards we will also ensure that doing continuous sampling of our general staff. As part of as per national guidelines, we are testing all close contacts of the positive cases, irrespective whether they are asymptomatic, and this has further contributed to us to being able to contain the spread of the virus. Our outbreak district outbreak response team are conducting oversight visit to the mine to ensure that compliance in the COVID-19. This was been the concern also raised by Honorable Muinma with regards to the mines that has an outbreak cases that is there. So we are continuously ensure that we do an unannounced visit to those mining areas. We also have dedicated team that works closely with
Provincial Department of Education to ensure that they have proper support towards the reopening of the schools. To date, we have connected local schools to specific healthcare facilities for proper support, as well as the identification and referral management of the suspect COVID-19 cases. We also have decided that and we need to have a dedicated team working closely with the Provincial Department of Social Development with respect to focus on old age homes in endeavor to ensure that elderly people are kept safe as possible environment that is conducive. Lastly, as an integrated approach with South African police services, South African Defence Force, government departments, municipalities, under the guidance and the leadership of the Premier Dr. Samani Sol, in helping us to ensure that we fight and contain the spread of virus in our province as in united force. Honorable Chairperson, we all this is in doing that, we together we can be able to reach and achieve this. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Honorable Manapula. The next speaker will be Honorable Madoda Sambata. MEC. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Honorable Sambata. Honorable Sambata from Honorable Sambata, is he present?
Yes, present.
Yes, it's present.
MEC, can you continue, please? Can you continue? MEC.
Honorable Chair.
Yes,
Chair, ministers, deputy
Can we see your video? Can you open your video, please? MEC Sambata, can you open your video?
I'm in a mine.
Oh, okay, you can continue. Thank you, sorry.
I'm in a mine. Thank you, Chairperson. The response of our government has unleashed the ability of the government to adjust its programs, plans, and budgets for comprehensive response to the pandemic and socio-economic impact presented by the COVID-19 pandemic. Through the government response, our people now have an experience of a different governance approach and response. The outbreak and the response has revealed how deep inequalities are in our country. The response has proven some long-held positions which in a normal functioning South Africa could not be understood. Let me explain few of those that could not be understood unless and understood when COVID-19 attacked us. The strengthening service delivery to communities, decommodification of services, introduction of basic income grant, irrespective of the amount, but just the introduction, conditions and daily experiences and care for the homeless citizens, the necessity to move with speed to implement NHI in Northwest Chairperson. As we speak of today, we have fully functional coordination between disaster management structures, local government, district and provincial, oversight role done by the provincial legislature and portfolio committees on response plans by different departments, including ensuring that all departments are overseen by the portfolio committees. Department of Health response strategy, incorporating local government MMCs, response assessment on each Monday, working relationship with the mining industry, as I've indicated currently, that I'm in a mine doing a mining oversight to check how they are ready for workplace implementation. In terms of as the Northwest, as we stand today, Chairperson, we are 2,315 positive cases. Of those in each district, we can explain Dr. Ruth Mumpati has 15 cases, 5 recoveries. Dr. Nakamudiri Mulema has 133, 19 recoveries, 1 death. Dr. Kenneth Kaunda has 685, 81 recoveries. Bujanala has 1,400 cases, 151 recoveries. If you take in our province, Chairperson, the epicenter remains Bujanala and Dr. Kenneth Kaunda. Of course, Bujanala contributes 62.2%, 1,440 of the 2,315 cases, and Dr. Kenneth Kaunda 685 of 2,300, which is 29%. If you check originally, even without COVID-19, if you were to check the appearance of the two districts in terms of TB and HIV, they are the dominant districts that has high prevalence of TB and HIV. And of course, the two are predominantly the mining districts in our province. That's why if you check our numbers, that on the 4th of June, we had 464. Just after the 4th, it picked up to higher numbers on the basis of the workplace return for mine workers. And these mine workers come to our province, and majority of these mine workers exposed are the ones who in lockdown level 5 had gone to labor sending areas. As they are recalled back, they have high exposure from the areas they are coming for. Of course, the intervention currently is that all mine workers returning for work are going to start in quarantine for 14 days before they are reintroduced in the workplace. And the other arrangement in the province is that we will ensure that the issue of contact tracing, because mine workers do not longer reside in hostels. Majority of them reside in communities. That's why if you check the impact of the mining, you will feel it in the education system. You will feel it in the community, because these mine workers are members of the community, not residing in hostels, but residing in communities. So our approach is to ensure that both the Department of Health, the Mineral Council, and the Department of Mineral Resources and individual mines, we ensure that we strengthen our working relationship in contact tracing and quarantine, in ensuring that we do not chase one and the same person whilst we think that we are looking for mine workers. Our province has that implementation. What I want to then raise, Chair, in closing, is the fact that the Minister of COGTA and the whole National Command Council, they have done well up to this far. The only thing that we have to do is to engage consistently communities on their roles. Now that movement is little bit allowed and working of industries is now allowed, the issue that we must stick to is the role of each South African and the role of each individual. It can't be that South Africans only remember coronavirus when they see a policeman, or when they see a soldier, or when they see a health official. It must be in our own conclusion that we will contribute in ensuring that the issue of flattening the curve becomes a responsibility of all of us. But we must still resist any element, including the EFF assumption that the Minister of COGTA has succumbed to bullying, or that suggests that the Minister of COGTA is being bullied. That on its own seeks to then make the Minister of COGTA to appear a lone person, or appear like the Minister of COGTA is the one that is driving, yet she and the collective are driving. South Africans must resist any temptation to personalize the government response, any temptation to attack an individual member of cabinet, any temptation to even attack an ANC president who acts as a president of the Republic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Sambata. The next speaker will be the Honorable Michael Wenger, and thereafter the House Chair, Nyambi, will take over the presiding of the House. Over to you, Chief Whip of the Majority Party of the Western Cape, Michael Wenger.
Good afternoon, Deputy Chair. As with the experiences we've heard about today in all provinces, COVID-19 is arguably the greatest challenge we have endured in our lifetimes. The pandemic has widespread effects on every single aspect of our daily lives. It impacts our health, the education of our children, our businesses and finance, our mental well-being, our futures, and our governments at all levels. But it is also due to this all-encompassing impact of the virus that the Western Cape adopted a whole-of-government approach. Because it's simply not enough for departments to work in silos. We need every resource at our disposal to be combined and concentrated in achieving safety for both our lives and our livelihoods. The whole of government means that, for example, when our nurses work tirelessly to care for infected patients, they are provided with PPE and equipped with knowledge to keep themselves and their patients as safe as possible with resources from the Provincial Health Department. It also means that Provincial Transport steps in, offering our innovative Red Dot service, which has now safely transported over 12,000 healthcare workers in the Western Cape. In our province, whole of government doesn't mean only government alone. We need every part of society to pull together. That's why the Red Dot service partnered with the taxi industry, creating a team of just under 200 taxis to transport healthcare workers, and when needed, people who make use of our public quarantine facilities, such as the Hospital of Hope, now Africa's largest field hospital. The whole of government is nothing without the whole of society behind it. Chair, as the Western Cape approaches the peak of infections, we can humbly say that our preparedness during lockdown is paying off. Our hotspot model, now adopted by national government, has given us the data-led capacity to isolate and trigger government action where it matters most. This includes providing community screening and testing in areas most vulnerable to infections. From early on, we identified Khayelitsha as a COVID-19 hotspot, and it soon rose to become the area with the second highest number of coronavirus cases in the province. Honourable Bibi will be interested to know that after initiating the whole of government's rapid response, Khayelitsha now has an 81% recovery rate. That is the highest recovery rate in the city of Cape Town Metropole. Chair, I am, however, concerned that without sufficient data, we cannot extensively test and measure infections. This is critical not just for the Western Cape, but for all provinces. The challenge here for national government is twofold. First, the National Health Laboratory Services needs to reach its stated capacity. Between the 9th and 15th of June, an average of just under 15,000 tests were conducted per day, yet the NHLS promised to deliver 36,000 tests per day by April. We are too far behind. Secondly, in addition to testing numbers per day, we need more kits to be available. In the Western Cape, we've had to make the difficult but important decision to prioritize testing following a risk-adjusted approach. Provinces who are behind us in infections will have to do the same if trends continue. Considering these two challenges, it can only be possible to resolve them by all spheres of government working together. But national government must lobby for national testing capacity and turn around as a collective. If we don't do this, we will not have access to data, and without data, how will we know when a province has reached its peak? Looking further down the line, without data, we will not know if and when a second wave of coronavirus strikes again, as the world has just witnessed in Beijing. While we welcome absolutely the eradication of the testing backlog in the Western Cape, which is an important achievement, it's not just about reducing the backlog. It's about ensuring that there is enough testing capacity to test widely so that we aren't forced to limit testing and can make informed decisions. Chair, with safety at the forefront of our minds during this time, we have to turn our attention with the greatest of care to our next generation. We have welcomed the safe, gradual reopening of schools and taken every measure possible to keep children safe in the Western Cape. However, the country has been waiting for far too long for the reopening of early childhood development centres. If national government is releasing regulations for the reopening of the personal care industry, cinemas and casinos, then surely we need to be in a place to do the same for ECDs. Thousands of children rely on them for meals and safe care whilst their parents are at work. Only ECDs connected to public schools have been given the green light to reopen in early July. But this is not enough, as most ECDs are privately run. Out of desperation, we are hearing that some ECDs are operating illegally. This is exceptionally dangerous in the absence of regulations and guidelines for health and safety protocols. Keeping ECD doors shut risks far more damage than good. Chair, policy needs to be guided by data and logic as we move through the phases of the risk-adjusted lockdown. When policy is absent, half thought through or ill-conceived, we send mixed signals to industries already under unbelievable pressure. It is uncertainty in an already volatile environment which can create panic and has a severe impact on the economy, job losses, and socio-economic conditions. In the Western Cape alone, we already face the incredibly grim picture of almost 250,000 job losses by December in the tourism industry. We can and we must save this situation together. Chairperson, for those who have suffered tremendous loss and need the safety net for which government must provide, we have in the Western Cape provided over 130,000 food parcels for families and almost 200,000 cooked meals. The war against women and children currently fought in gender-based violence is being addressed through increased efforts of counselling and shelters for victims of such crimes. Efforts are ramped up on all fronts, including our Provincial Social Development Department's support of child protection services and psychosocial assistance to those in need. Our Department of Community Safety is implementing a full-time official within the Court Watching Brief Unit to actively monitor cases of GBV and domestic abuse. We also will continue to provide training to SAPS officials in the Domestic Violence Act and communicate far and wide on all resources available to survivors and those at risk of abuse. Chair, as I have said, these extraordinary times do require the whole of government to work together. Local, provincial, and national spheres need to work together to support residents at this uncertain and challenging time. To do this, funding and resources need to be allocated where the greatest impact will be made, so that we meet the needs of each individual, family, and community. For this reason, we welcome the President's pledge of additional financial support to the Western Cape so that we can continue to serve the people of the province. We eagerly await the details of these funds as we approach the peak. The call to action by every government department, every nurse and doctor, every civil servant, and every community-based organization is now greater than ever before. The task before us may seem insurmountable, but the resilience of the South African people has seen us through unthinkable difficulties. May we, as governments and as duly elected representatives, rise to the occasion in support of overcoming this challenge of our lifetime. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Wenger. Over to you, Honorable Nyambi.
Thank you, Deputy Chairperson. The next speaker is the Honorable Deputy Minister of Health, Dr. Pasha. Honorable Dr. Pasha.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you very much. I hope I can be heard. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Let me pass my regards also to the Chairperson of the NCOP, Honorable Masondo, and the Deputy Chair, Honorable Lucas, who has just left the podium, and our Chief Whip. Good afternoon to all the honorable members. Let me also pass my greetings to the honorable members and also to colleagues in the executive, the ministers and deputy ministers who are present. We take this opportunity to update the honorable House on the progress we are making in the management of this pandemic of COVID-19. Today, as we meet, this is the 144th day since the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 as a pandemic on the 31st of January 2020. after having classified it as a health emergency of international concern on the 20th of January 2020. Today also is a landmark in that we've just passed 110 days since our first confirmed case of COVID-19 on the 5th of March in the KwaZulu-Natal area, the first one in South Africa, who had traveled abroad. Since then, honorable members, a lot has changed, both in the world and in the continent, and also in our own country. As reported by the World Health Organization 2 days ago on the 21st of June, the spread of COVID-19 continues to affect several countries around the world, with an increase in total number of confirmed cases standing as of yesterday at 8.7 million, with over 461,000 deaths, which is 5.3% fatality rate. In Europe, the average count of COVID-19 related deaths have overtaken those in Asia early in March, with Italy, Spain, and the UK becoming the new global hotspots. From mid-April, the focus shifted to the USA, where the number of deaths remained consistently high and currently stand accounting for 13% of the global fatality. Latin America has recently seen an increase to almost half of the new deaths, fueled by a surge of COVID-19 cases and fatalities in Brazil. Brazil has become the second country to reach 1 million COVID-19 infections, coming second only after the United States, which has already passed 2 million infections in June. In Africa, as of the 21st of June, South Africa is still leading, followed by Egypt with 53,000, Nigeria with just over 19,000, and then Algeria and Ghana coming next. It should be noted that we were able to account for cases based on testing. So in the countries where maybe there may be limited capacity to test, it may be difficult to know what the rate of infection is. In South Africa, the cumulative number of infections as of yesterday was 101,500, reflecting a 4.4% increase over the last few days. Of the cumulative number of 22nd of June, 53% of those 101,000 have recovered. That is 53,444 have already recovered. The national fatality rate based on the deaths up to now, it's 1.9% of those who have been infected. The driving force behind the measures which we are taking to curb the spread of COVID-19 were basing on the numbers of cases which we are witnessing and the trajectory of confirmed cases which we are seeing in our country. Local transmission has now been established in all the 9 provinces. So we are no more having infections based on import from abroad. This is now local transmission in our communities, spreading across both affluent and vulnerable communities. To give members a sense of the breakdown in terms of provinces, we have already spoken that we have got a total of 101,500 total in the country. Out of this, the bulk of this, almost more than half of the infections are in the Western Cape, cumulatively at 52,500, followed by Gauteng at 22,300, and then Eastern Cape at 16,800, almost 16,900, and KZN is number 4 with 5,000, just under 5,300. These have been the top 4 provinces over the last 2 months. What is of concern, as the Honorable MEC for Northwest would have mentioned earlier on, is the fact that the Northwest has now overtaken a province which was number 5 in terms of infections, which was Free State by far. As the Honorable Sambata mentioned, there's clusters in the mining industry. The Northwest has now, as of yesterday, reached 2,300 from having been one of the very bottom ones. So it's been experiencing over 100 confirmed infections per day over the last 10 days or so. So it should be noted, as I've mentioned, that Western Cape is leading with Gauteng number 2, and then Eastern Cape, and then KwaZulu-Natal, and then Northwest. So in terms of just a sense of where this is on the ground happening, as we said, Western Cape is leading with the Metro of Cape Town, as the honorable member of the DA who spoke before me would have mentioned. The Cape Town Metro, out of the 52,000 of Western Cape, Cape Town Metro accounts for almost 40,000 at 38,000. And then in smaller numbers, big in terms of the totals, but in terms of the Western Cape number, the next one is the Cape Winelands at just over 4,000, and then followed by the West Coast. So those are the top in terms of districts, so that we have a sense of where actually this is happening. In the Eastern Cape, again, the Metro, the Nelson Mandela Metro is the highest with 4,000, and then followed by Buffalo City Metro, that's under 4,000, and then the OR Tambo region, and then Chris Hani. So what is the significant in the Eastern Cape is that we also have significant infections in rural districts, unlike Western Cape, where it's largely in the metro. We've got the two metros, but also in the rural districts. Gauteng takes the same trend, with Johannesburg leading by far. Out of the 22,000 of Gauteng, just over 10,300 is in Johannesburg, and then followed by Ekurhuleni and then Tshwane. So when you go to KZN, which is number 3 as well, same trend. eThekwini leading by far with just under 3,000, and then Ilembe district, and then by a smaller number, Umgungundlovu, and then the other districts. Again, coming back to Northwest, which I mentioned is a worrying trend, in the sense that through the opening of the economy, especially opening of the mining industry, we have seen a surge in infections. As we speak, as of yesterday, I mentioned 2,300, out of which the big bulk is actually in the Rustenburg area. Bujanala, about 1,300 of that is in the Bujanala district, with Rustenburg leading by far, and then followed by KK, the Kenneth Counter district, Klerksdorp, Potchefstroom, those areas with 685. So again, we can see that in the Northwest, this is driven by opening up of the economy, especially in the mining areas. Now, my colleague, the Honorable MEC for Northern Cape, did touch on our approach in terms of the preparation, the primary prevention, the lockdown as the various stages. Now, key to that will be just to again emphasize to honorable members that key, therefore, is the community education on basics of prevention. Hand wash, social distancing, avoiding crowds, wearing masks, coughing with a tissue and throwing it away. And the next approach is for us now to make sure that we do the screening, surveillance, and testing, making sure that we do contact tracing, and making sure that those who are found to be ill are actually taken care of in hospitals. And very key actually is isolation and quarantine. And lastly, making sure that we can look after those who are ill in ordinary hospital beds, but also in high care and ICUs. So we have been focusing in terms of now, as pronounced by the president, through when we went to level 3 relaxation, we're focusing on the hotspots, and there are 29 of those hotspots in the country. So we're closely monitoring that, setting up intervention targeted at screening and testing in those hotspots, making sure that our facilities are ready to take care of those who need care. Now, just to give a sense to honorable members, as of 2 days ago, in terms of hospitalization, we're showing that in the Western Cape, we have just under 1,600 hospitalizations, most of whom are in ordinary hospital beds, not in ICU. If you go to the Eastern Cape, also just over 500, and just around 450 of those are ordinary hospital beds. If you go to the Northwest, so generally, the dominant at this stage has been that those who need hospital care, fortunately for us, have been needing ordinary hospital beds, not necessarily in the ICU. But when you come to ICU as well, just to give you a sense of where we are, in the Western Cape, as of yesterday, about 220 in ICU, and then in Gauteng around 140, and in the Eastern Cape around 61 in the ICU. So as of 2 days ago, 6% of hospitalized patients are also on ventilation, and the national number of patients on ventilation has been increasing from a low of just over 122 to where we are now at over 200. And as of 21st, the Western Cape had about 50% of patients on ICU being on oxygen. Gauteng also has been increasing in terms of patients who needed oxygen. Now, in total, as of the 21st of June, 16% of patients who are admitted in hospital are on oxygen, because the approach which the specialists now, learning from international experience, has been that the doctors should not rush to put patients who are serious on ventilators, but rather put them on oxygen, and many of them do recover basically from just being put on oxygen. As of 21st of June, Gauteng accounted for 49% of patients on oxygen. Now, a major issue, honorable members, is the quarantine and isolation. Now, because it is also very in terms of containment of this pandemic. Now, as regards that, as of 20th of June, the number of planned sites for quarantine all over the country is 404 facilities, which will provide us with over 37,000 quarantine and isolation beds. The majority of the sites are in the Eastern Cape, in Gauteng, and the Western Cape. The number of those, as I've mentioned, we have capacity for about 37,000. Those which have already been activated in the last 2 days were just over 12,000 of beds which were available. So those which were already activated were largely in KZN, in Gauteng, and also in the Western Cape. So what is key here that I want to highlight is that we do face a challenge. The challenge here being quarantine, isolation, quarantine of those who are contacts and who are also waiting for results is very important. And isolation for those who have already tested positive to cut down on the transmission in the community. Now, a major challenge which we have been experiencing, especially in the Western Cape, is a situation where many of the people who are either contacts or have already even tested positive are very, very reluctant to go into isolation and to go into quarantine if they are still waiting for results. On average, out of every 100 positive tested people in the Western Cape, only between 15 and 20% have been agreeing to go into quarantine. So out of those who have tested positive, you have 80%, even those who don't have home facilities, which can guarantee quarantine, in self-isolation, are not taking up. So that is a major risk in terms of the transmission. So in conclusion, Chair, I want to just emphasize this fact that the battle, our ability to win this battle is not going to depend largely on doctors and in ICU and hospital beds. It's going to depend on our ability to mobilize communities, ordinary South Africans, to take care of prevention. And if they have a contact who has been tested positive, to agree to either self-isolate in their homes, if they don't have facilities, to agree to go into a government-provided isolation and quarantine facility. If we can do that, just look after the basics, very few people will end up in hospital, very few people will end up in ICU. I thank you very much, Honorable Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Dr. Pasha. Let me now invite Honorable Lond. Honorable Lond.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Ministers and Honorable Members. I appreciate the opportunity to participate here today. We will in all likelihood breach the official 2,000 mark in COVID-19 related deaths today. And our sincere condolences go out to the families, the friends and the loved ones of those who have lost their lives. To start off, I will agree with Minister Patel. Minister Patel, the virus was indeed sudden, unexpected and unprecedented. That is why there were widespread support for the swift and clear action steps to go for a hard lockdown and allow the healthcare system to prepare for the spike. Where we start to disagree, however, is that government should have been healthy to deal with this crisis. A crisis like this lays bare the core of a government. This crisis is affecting our governments in a similar manner that the coronavirus affects the human body. Honorable Wenger clearly illustrated how a healthy, corruption-free government like the Western Cape could step up to the plate with confidence, honesty, and having continuous, clear communications with the residents of the Western Cape. Being a healthy government, the Western Cape could fight the crisis much better, even though we still feel the effects. The crisis also clearly showed the rotten, unhealthy core of the ANC governments, with the only real beneficiaries being those connected to entrepreneurs who overinflate the delivery of basics for fighting this crisis, not to help those in need. This unhealthy underlying conditions of corruption, nepotism, cadre deployment, dishonesty is devastating when faced with a crisis like COVID-19. I echo Honourable Ryder. This government broke an already fragile economy with the incompetence in dealing with the crisis. But, Honourable Ryder, it is not often that I will disagree with my colleagues. In this instance, I need to. I will even go a step further to make a prediction. The ANC members in this House, the National Assembly, municipal councils across the country, at rallies, wherever they go, will use COVID-19 as an excuse to hide their own failures in preparing us as a country to meet this crisis head on. Minister Dlamini Zuma, I will also wholeheartedly agree with you. The situation could have been much, much, much worse. And there's many reasons that I can give to support you in that statement. But I'll give you one. You could have been our president during this crisis. Throughout the crisis, the DA has been weeks ahead of the ANC government in putting clear, workable proposals forward that would have steered us much more smoothly through these stormy times. We do not live in a creche. Despite the actions of some ministers supporting this argument, we live in a democracy with adults who should be empowered with more decision-making control over their own lives. Now that this lockdown has decimated the economy, Minister Patel and others come with a catchphrase of a job-rich economy. Your words mean nothing. It is hollow with no substance. It will not be easy to undo the havoc wreaked on our economy by the ANC. Unfortunately, you will only be tested nationally in 2024. In the meantime, as our leader said earlier this week, there is only one correct way, which is to immediately walk away from the suicidal policies such as expropriation without compensation, the NHI, and the prescription of assets, and implement the economic reform that is needed to grow South Africa. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Lond. The next speaker is Honorable Mkiva. Honorable Mkiva.
Chairperson.
Yes, Honorable Mkiva.
Thank you, Chairperson, for the opportunity. Let me take this time as well to greet the Chief Whip, as well as the honorable members of this august House, permanent and special delegates, ministers and deputy ministers, MECs from all the respective provinces, delegates of SALGA, fellow South Africans. Chairperson, mandiqale ndiphefumle ngokuthi ndibhekise umyalezo wovelwano kumakhaya onke elizwe lakokwethu athe aphulukana nabantu ngelithuba lale ngxingongo ye-COVID. Sithi kubo akuhlanga lungehliyo lungaqhelanga kwehla. Sinabo ngeli xesha lale ntsunguzi kwaye sifuna ukuthi siyazi into kokubana izizalwane zabo bazikhaphe phantsi kwemeko emantsantsa. Sithi ke kubo mabangxenga igazi bathoba inhliziyo, bangalahli imbeleko ngakufela. Liyakuthi lakufika ithuba apho igqithileyo le meko yalo bhubhane, bakwazi ukwenza isingxengxezo, baphinde baye bayawunika imbeko ekhethekileyo kwabo basanduleleyo. Ndifuna ukuthi sihlalo kwangamqhelomnye, njengoko sidibene apha namhlanje sixoxa ngalo mba, ndiyafuna ugqithisa umyalezo okhethekileyo kubantu bakokwethu bonke beli lasemhlabuhlangene ngelithi sibabulele ngokuthi bawamkele umyalezo nomgqaliselo okhutshwa ngumongameli uRamaphosa nesigqeba sonke esikhokhela ilizwe ukuthi yonke into ebebeyixelelwa ukuba mabayenze bathe bayenza ngobunene nangembeko eyiyo. Sithi mabaqhubekeke beqaphela yonke imigqaliselo ebekiweyo sisikhokhelo selizwe. Ndiyafuna ukuthi ngakumbi kubantu basemakhaya, abantu basezilalini nabantu baselokishini bayazi into okokubana le nyewe nale meko yale COVID yinto eyiyo, yinto eyinene, yinto ekhoyo phakathi kwethu esihlaseleyo kwaye lutshaba olungabonakaliyo ngeliso lenyama. Sithi ke siyakhahlela nakwinkokheli zomgquba, iinkokheli zemveli, ngokuthi zivume into okokubana kubekho intsebenziswano eyiyo phakathi kwazo norhulumente, zincedisane norhulumente ekuseni umyalezo nokuqinisekisa into okokubana benzela abantu into okokubana benze yonke into abaxelelwa ukuba mabayenze nento abaxelelwa into okubana bangayenzi. Lo myalezo siyawukhupha kananjalo kwiinkokheli zemvaba ngemvaba neetyalike ngeetyalike zelizwe lakokwethu nezithe nazo zavuma into okokubana zilurhoxise ubhedesho norhamento lwecawe zeli leli lizwe ukwenzela into okokubana kuthotywe isantya sokulwatyuza nokuhambela phezulu kwesi sifo secorona. Sifuna ukuthi siyakhahlela nakwimibutho yangasese ezimeleyo, i-NGOs ne-NPO, nawo wonke umuntu okhoyo kwi-civil society othe wasebenzisana norhulumente kwakunye namafama nangegalelo lawo kwisithebe semali nengxowa ethe yavezwa ibizwa ngoba yi-Solidarity Fund. Amanye amafama enza umzekelo omhle ade akhupha neenkabi zenkomo ukuncedisana nesizwe ekubeni sibe silwana nalo bhubhane. Ndiyafuna ke ukuthi ke xa ndizawuya kolwasemzini, the year 2020 has proven and continue to prove that it is a difficult year for South Africa and the world over. For us in South Africa, we entered 2020 at the back of a technical recession in terms of the economy. The economic forecast was that our economy will grow by 0.9% with a slight improvement in 2021. Our revenue collection had not been at a desired level, but that has been worsened by the outbreak of the coronavirus. The situation got complicated with this advent of the corona pandemic, which has been declared by the World Health Organization as a global pandemic. COVID-19 has disrupted the economic activities in our country as well as at a global level, as our ministers, Minister Dlamini Zuma, as well as Ministers Patel has alluded to that. President Cyril Ramaphosa and our government declared a national state of disaster and subsequent lockdown and announced a package of extraordinary measures to combat this grave public health emergency. We want to applaud the government for taking correct and decisive action to save the lives of our people. Ndiyafuna ukuyigxininisa loo nto uba urhulumente wethu ubeke impilo zabantu ngaphambi kwenzuzo. It is in the nature of the ANC and the ANC government to put the lives of the people first. We say life first and profits last, not like other people who want to put profits before the lives of our people. The pandemic has also disrupted our social life in a very big way. As we speak, many of us would have wished to bid farewell to our beloved friends and extended family members who passed on during the lockdown, but we could not do so. Others would have wanted to celebrate their marital unions, but could not do so. And we want to thank them for respecting the measures that have been put across and agree to postpone those ceremonies because they are non-essential. We also witnessed for the first time in our memorable history the cancellation of the initiation season by traditional leaders in solidarity with our government to put the lives of our young men under protection. This is an unprecedented thing in the history of our country, to have a universal cancellation of the winter initiation season. And we want to salute Contralesa as well as the National House of Traditional Leadership in our country. So the debate is taking place under the background provided and therefore inevitable. It takes into account the context within which we find ourselves. Government has correctly outlined various interventions during the lockdown, ranging from security, social, and economic measures. On the security front, the President has deployed the South African National Defence Force to offer support and work hand in glove with the South African police to ensure that lockdown regulations are enforced. We want to salute the forces of our country and want to acknowledge that there are isolated cases wherein some of the members of both the army and the police have done mistakes, and we're saying that the law must take its course in that regard. But on the overall, we want to say the South African army as well as the South African police have displayed true leadership in terms of assisting our government in ensuring that the regulations are truly enforced. The President has announced various intervention measures to offer relief and support to businesses affected severely by the lockdown. The President announced a massive social relief and economic support package to the tune of 500 billion. The ministers have dealt with this matter. I will not emphasize it further, but it is really also unprecedented that our government has put almost 10% of the gross domestic product to actually intervene during this time of the crisis that we face as a nation. The President also indicated that child support grant beneficiaries will receive an extra 300 rand in this year, and a further additional 500 later in the year. All other grant beneficiaries will also receive an extra 250 rands in the next 6 months. In addition, a special COVID-19 social relief distress grant of 350 a month for the next 6 months will be paid to individuals who are currently unemployed and do not receive any other form of the social grant or UIF payment. This is critical because it goes a long way to families who do not have an income, who do not have something to eat at the end of the day. So this money will be put into good use in terms of buying groceries for the families out there. The Department of Social Development has partnered with the Solidarity Fund, NGOs and community-based organizations to distribute food parcels. We applaud the NGOs who voluntarily did so and individual South Africans who also contributed to this humanitarian act, guided by the African philosophy of Ubuntu. Umntu ngumntu ngabantu. An additional amount of 2 billion was made available to assist SMMEs and spaza shop owners and other small businesses as well as informal businesses. To further support our businesses, the IDC has utilized its facility to support companies to procure and manufacture personal protective equipment, as Minister Patel has alluded to. Government has also introduced a 200 billion loan guarantee scheme in partnership with major banks and the National Treasury, as well as the South African Reserve Bank. We urge the banking institutions not to discriminate when processing applications for relief under the loan guarantee. For its part, the Reserve Bank has cut the repo rate by 200 basis points, in effect unlocking at least 80 billion in the real economy. These measures are obviously not without challenges. We are aware that we are processing and approving all these relief applications at a time that has got its own challenges. However, we acknowledge that a sizable number of businesses have been assisted already. We have not had a situation of a national lockdown in the recent memory, so we learn as we go. The COVID-19 has not only brought negative impact in our socio-economic reality, but also acted as a catalyst for coordination within the state, entrenching social solidarity among South Africans, as well as speeding up new ways of doing things, the new normal, as we say it. Mntwana omhle, ndiyafuna into yokubana ndikhe ndihlomle kwizinto ebezithethwa ngabanye abantu abangamalungu ale ndlu yethu. Let me start off with some of the statements that have been made by the Honorable Rider, where he makes an inference that our government has been authoritarian in terms of doing certain matters. It leaves much to be desired to hear Honorable Rider saying such. What does he know about authoritarian regime? This government is a people's government elected by the majority of South Africans. And therefore, President Ramaphosa had not just acted unilaterally. He consulted all the political parties that are represented in parliament from time to time. He did not end there. He also consulted civil society, labor leaders, religious leaders, and traditional leaders several times to ensure that before he takes any action, he actually communicates with all the formations in the country. So there is no such authoritarian style of leadership on the part of our government. Secondly, he is thumb-sucking the issue of the jobs that will be lost as a result of this COVID. He must leave that to the experts and the institutions of state that are charged with that responsibility to give us the correct numbers in terms of what we'll actually obtain after this COVID. It seems to me Honorable Rider does not have a sense of nationness. Instead of focusing on real issues that are about putting the lives first in this country, they are concerned about tobacco and liquor sales in this country. They have been up and down, going to the courts of this land to try and lift the ban on tobacco sales and liquor sales. Look, you can't romanticize the issue of smoking and liquor. We are dealing with the lives of people here. And this thing of you always being suspicious and superstitious about the good acts of our government needs to come to a stop. You can't always smell a rat when we are hard at work trying to solve the challenges of our country. Now, I also want to touch, Honorable Chairperson, that
as you conclude,
one of the reasons why we have the current situation where the party in the form of the GA is going up and down is because in the Western Cape itself, it has abdicated its responsibility. And now we sit with the Western Cape province as the epicenter of the COVID because the government of that province is seeing itself outside the scope of the unitary states. Instead, it wants to compete with the national government. And it has sidetracked, it has not focused on what it is required to do. We want to tell them that they must stop this selfishness and act along the way that we work with other provinces as a national government. It is not a government that is independent from the national equation. And I also want to say, Chair, as I conclude, that I want to agree with that honorable member from the Western Cape, Honorable Member Wenger, who says we cannot afford to work in silos. We need to work together as local government, as provincial government, as well as national government. We are one country, and the citizens of South Africa are equal citizens, and they need the equal treatment from our government. And
thank you,
what the
Honorable Mkiva.
Thank you very much. Very much.
The next speaker is Honorable Mohai.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you, Chairperson, and allow me to thank everyone who has participated meaningfully in this debate. Earlier on, I wanted to share my constituency office experience in the Free State area called Betuli, which I said is hardest hit by COVID-19, and that ongoing community awareness is needed, and also testing that has got to reach to the greater numbers of our communities. And currently, out of 104 cases at a time when I was preparing my notes, active cases 104, and out of that 64 cases are recoveries, and 5 are the deaths, which demonstrate that some work that is done by the province provincial government and the people of the local municipality. I'm raising that because Minister Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma and Minister Patel and the Deputy Minister Dr. Patla were very elaborate on articulation of governance and economic framework of our government response to COVID-19. Also, that the Deputy Minister took some time to relate to both local and global experience of the COVID-19 and how countries and South Africa in particular is performing. So I say special thanks to Ministers Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma and Minister Patel and the Deputy Minister for setting time aside to participate meaningfully in this debate. We reaffirm our confidence in the leadership of President Ramaphosa and his cabinet collective and dismiss with contempt any attempt to single out Dr. Dlamini Zuma from collective decisions of cabinet and command council. At the core of the attack against Dr. Dlamini Zuma is the protection of the criminal economic interest of the multinational corporations of the tobacco industry, who are bent on undermining tax laws in every country. Chairperson, records are there to prove that even before lockdown, billions and billions of rands were lost in revenue of this country through criminal and illegal conduct by multinational tobacco industry. Some are even investigated for tax crimes in their own countries and criminal business practices. Honorable Ryder comes here with the audacity to lecture us about economics when in fact speaking for syndicates in the tobacco industry. As Minister Nkosazana have said, the NC government will continue to listen to the views of every South African against the balance of evidence. We will, however, not glorify interest groups who come here and pretend to be speaking for our people when they know they derive their mandate from the organized interest groups. Honorable Baha from the DA, thank you for speaking truth to powers that be on the fundamental issues you have raised that affect our people. Honorable Ryder doesn't even shy away to assign you a task to speak about socio-economic conditions of our people, and he speak on behalf of the corporates about tobacco. Has hardly mentioned anything around access to social facilities, backlog, nothing. It is your task to have to raise those issues. But thank you, you have not succumbed to raise the interests of the elites in your party. The EFF and IFP have raised issues that we share around backlogs and shortages of medical equipment and conditions of the poor. And we agree with government when it says that it will continue to audit where imports are outside the country in order to measure its readiness around this PPE. I want to appreciate the inputs of all MECs that participated in this debate today. The MEC from Limpopo has raised some key best practices in the rural communities, which I hope will draw lessons from. Of course, Dr. Poppy Ramatupa has raised specific issues around experiences that in the past, through cultural and traditional practices, have always have the ability to relate to some of the issues under difficult conditions when there's outbreak of diseases. I believe that will follow up on these matters. And also Salga for highlighting successes and challenges that faces local government, very pointed indeed. I want to say, to conclude, that government has to dedicate some time to work on the volunteer program plan, which is required now, not tomorrow, to plan broad responses in case public resources are overwhelmed. Many South Africans are willing to offer free services in terms of planning, logistics, and general management responses. The uniquely African response, getting our people to work and help finding working local solutions. Home care, cooking, and sharing of food, as our people have demonstrated during this national disaster period. We need to educate more of our people about what to expect during funeral practices, preparing kids for schooling, and caring for the elderly, and continue to partner with the NGOs. And I want to join all my comrades, Comrade Mkiva, who said that siyakhatlela kuyo yonke imibutho esebenza emizini yethu nohulumende ibambisane. Thanks very much. All the best.
Thank you, Chief Whip. Honorable members, thank you, Chief Whip. Other members, honorable members, on behalf of the leadership of the National Council of Provinces, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Minister of Culture, Honorable Dlamini Zuma, the Minister of Trade and Industry, Honorable Patel, the Deputy Minister of Health, Honorable Dr. Patla, the special delegates from Salga, all our special delegates, our councillor representative from Salga, all of you honorable members for availing yourself for this very important debate. That concludes the business of the day. The House is adjourned.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye, Mikey.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Chief Whip. Thank you very much. Well done.
Minister.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thanks, Minister.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye, Poppy. You are doing well there.
Bye, Minister. Thanks. MECs.
All the MECs, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sanlana, you must go and join the legislature now. Jomo.
Bye, Chief Whip.
Honorable Chief Whip.
Hey, Honorable Ngwenya. Thanks.
See you, Honorable Chief Whip.
Hey, great man. Now you are on camera now.
Yeah, I'm now on camera and everything. Everything. I disappeared and then I got back again. So
thanks.
I feel like a ghost.
Great.
But I will speak to you now, sir. Please. Okay.
Yeah, after here I'll call you.
Yeah, please. Okay.
Thank you very much, Chief Whip. Honorable members, thank you very much. Honorable Dango.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Honorable Naita.
Hey, Dango, the meeting is over. Eunice, go home.
Eunice, you know, trouble is when you come from KwaZulu-Natal, you get confused.
Why? Go home.
You don't know where home is. KwaZulu-Natal or Cape Town.
I can see my brother.
Jalo, are you there? Yeah, I'm just going to assist him. I think he's struggling with his sound. Let me see if I can.
Yeah.
I think we must fix this one. Yeah.
Honorable Smith.
In this, yeah, he came right at the last minute. Honorable Smith started working. I'm not sure what happened there. Let me see. I'm gonna do some support here for him.
I think Honorable Mkaus.
Let me see if I can do this quickly. I want to check a few things on his machine.
Okay.
Let's see here. I still. No, I don't know if he can hear me. I don't think he can hear me. Let me call him. You're going to carry on with this. Still some, quite a few
members
online. Let's see who is here.
We have your screen, Ravi.
Hey?
We have your screen.
You have my screen. Oh, am I sharing? No, I'm not sharing.
You are.
No, it's somebody else, I think. Let's see, it's just blank now. Now I was gonna do a remote support. Let me call Honorable Jadu, I think. You want to continue with your meeting and I'll phone him because he can't hear me.
I see the Honorable Nzume.
I'm trying to move, but I can't if I can't see on the screen.
Just move them to the okay, I'm going to move them to the waiting room.
Yeah, move them to the waiting room.
Yeah. There we go. I think that's the last of the members.
Let's
see. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Are they all gone?
Yeah.
All right. Who else is joining? Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
All the NCOP staff.
Are they joining now?
The notice was sent at 10. Those who doesn't have the link, they requested the link. I sent it. I'm assuming everyone should have it.
I just wanted to check on the minutes.
I see that number has remained static at 24. Is Jeremy here? Jeremy?
No, he's not here. Okay.
Okay. Shaida?
Yes, Advocate.
Who doesn't have a link?
Who doesn't have the link? It's only plenaries that have the link. That plenary NCOP chat, PCS, all the people that's been working on the settings. The rest of the NCOP staff do not have that link, but Mpumi said she did send it to them now. Yeah, so it's, I see Yolandi's on, so she also didn't have that link. So she probably used the one that Mpumi sent.
Hello,
Okay.
are you sending the link? Freak says he doesn't have.
I'll resend it to everyone, advocate, but I wish I could also indicate that the message was sent at 10 o'clock, at 10. By 1 o'clock, I'm assuming that everyone who doesn't have the link by now, they should have indicated that they don't have.
Okay, it's fine. Resend it.
I've sent it.
On the chat, Mpumi, maybe it's better if you sent it on the chat.
Is it sent out?
Yes, I've sent it, advocate. I'm waiting for them to connect.
Okay. I'll give them another 5 minutes. There's only one person who has connected. Sure. Okay. Managers, can you assist us to have people reporting to you connecting, please? Can you assist us, please?
Yeah, forget.
Please.
Yes, yes, I think we are doing that.
Okay.
Who is P. Mahlasela?
Baby, are you raising your hand?
Yeah.
Baby.
Yeah.
Yes.
Advocate. Baby is raising her hand.
I can't hear you, Shaida.
Mahlasela is an interpreter.
Oh, okay.
Okay, you were saying, Mr. Mbebe?
I'm saying Maureen is having a problem, Sajjala.
Oh, of connecting.
Yes, sir.
Does she have a network problem?
And also Tandi Ngoko.
Is it network or what?
Maureen is saying, I'm not sure. It bounces back all the time that I'm trying to connect.
Okay.
So I will propose, Secretary, that you continue and others can join us on the way. At least we've been sitting here since 9 o'clock and we are a bit tired.
Yes, okay. Okay, colleagues. Good afternoon, colleagues. Who has connected, who hasn't connected? There are only two people who have a problem.
Majority of the NSOP staff and other staff that were participating in the sitting are connected.
Okay.
But Advocate, I don't see Mado and Shelley.
Have they left?
Looks like. Ravi's here.
Yeah. I see Shelly there.
Shelley's here.
Oh,
Shelly?
okay.
Yeah, I see Shelly.
Yes.
My apologies.
Yeah, I can't see Mado though. Okay, good afternoon, colleagues. Just quickly to take stock of the sittings that we recently had. I think from the 18th, the 19th, and today, I think we have reviewed other previous sittings. I will take comments. We are reviewing with a view of improving in the future sittings. I will quickly take comments, colleagues. Maybe I should start with Ravi, Shelly, Mado. Anybody from interpretation here? An interpreter? Nobody from interpretation. Okay, all right. Shelly? Shelly? Ravi? Ravi? Okay. Mr. Mbebe? Advocate?
Yes, sir.
I see your hand is up, and then Lizelle, your hand is also up.
No. My head was up to address the issue of Maureen, but I'm cool.
Okay, can you take your hand down?
I'll do that.
Thank you very much. Lizelle?
Morning, Advocate. Morning, colleagues. Just a small thing. One is that I would suggest that when members ask the procedural staff to assist them with something, they use the private messages because their phone numbers and all the contact details keep flashing on DSTV. So it's not private at all.
Sorry, Liesel, to interrupt you, Ravi. The setting, this link is still live on 4.8?
No.
No, it's not. It's not.
I'm being told it's live on Facebook.
On
Someone
4
just sent me a message. I can hear it via Facebook. Is that what you want for a meeting to be live? So it's still live streaming. Mado?
Because 4.8, I see there's a
Programming.
there's a presentation there.
Well, it's on Facebook. It's on the streaming. It's a live stream on Facebook. Which means if the live stream is still on, it's on Twitter as well and on I don't know. Is Mado not yet on?
I'm communicating with Mado. Mado. Apparently, we have a review meeting, and they're saying our meeting is on Facebook. We are using the link that was for the plenary. If we can be disconnected. All right. You are also requested to join that meeting, ne? Same link, yes. All right, thanks.
Are we off air now, Mado?
Mado is attending to it.
Will she give us an indication?
I'll communicate with him.
No, we're still live on Facebook, Advocate. I can see it. Oh, on YouTube. Yeah, we're still live on YouTube.
I just also saw on YouTube. Yeah.